Headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. This is GB News to the point with me, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
On the show today, it's all about green. The government are publishing 18 documents confirming that dash to net zero. Is that going to put your energy bills down? I doubt it.
That's right. Also this morning, the government is facing more pressure from some Tory MPs to stop the European Court of Human Rights from restricting its illegal migration bill. Dominic Raab says that he will hold further talks with the court in order to guarantee the bill won't be challenged after being signed into law.
Long overdue. And the King and Queen Consort, they're in Germany on their first state visit, will be with them live as he addresses the German Parliament in German, the first British monarch to do so.
And also this morning, schools are basically allowing children to change their gender via their names, their uniforms, etc., without parents being alerted. Is this a step towards dangerous gender ideology, or is it just allowing young people to take control of their lives?
Let us know your thoughts on all of our talking points. So you know what to do. You email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're going to get stuck into all those top stories for today. But first, here's your morning news with Rhiannon Jones.
Good morning, it's 9:32, your top stories from the GB newsroom. The government's set to announce plans to cut greenhouse gases and lower energy costs. The new net zero plan, called Powering Up Britain, will invest in renewables and nuclear in a bid to make the country less reliant on foreign energy supplies. Investment will go into carbon capture technology and offshore wind, as well as hydrogen production. It comes as the Chancellor accuses President Biden of protectionism over his plan to offer green tax breaks to American car manufacturers. Jeremy Hunt's concerns the levies could wipe out the UK's £4.3 billion car export market to the US. Energy Secretary Grant Shapps says the US will contribute to a bigger green market and the UK wants to be part of that competitive market. He says if US companies get priority by getting tax cuts. Sir Keir Starmer's set to announce Labour will freeze council tax bills this year. The Labour leader will unveil the pledge as he launches the party's local elections campaign in Swindon later. The move will be funded by a windfall tax on the profits of oil and gas companies. Pope Francis has been hospitalised due to a respiratory infection, the Vatican's announced. It's understood the 86-year-old complained of breathing difficulties in recent days. He was taken to Rome's Gemelli Hospital for tests and doesn't have COVID. It's hoped he could still be discharged in time for Palm Sunday celebrations on April the 2nd. The King and Queen Consort's state visit to Germany continues today. King Charles will address the Bundestag later, becoming the first British monarch to do so. The German president hailed the visit as a new chapter in relations between his country and the UK yesterday during a state banquet in Berlin. President Steinmeier thanked the King for choosing Germany as his first foreign visit as head of the royal family, describing it as a tremendous personal gesture. And in the last few minutes, the Standards Committee has recommended that Margaret Ferrier should be suspended for breaching COVID rules. The Rutherglen and Hamilton West MP was found to have gone on a train and taken part in a debate whilst she had coronavirus. TV online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News now. It's back to Andrew and Beth.
Very good morning. It's 9:34. Thank you for joining Andrew and I this morning. Now, the King has pledged to strengthen ties with Germany on day one of his first state visit as monarch.
He was at a banquet in Berlin alongside the German president. Question, does anybody know the president's name? He said the relationship between Britain and Germany matters greatly and it mattered especially to his late mother.
So, as King Charles prepares to address the German parliament later today, he will become the first British monarch to do so.
Our royal reporter Cameron Walker joins us now to look back on their first day. Cameron, morning, historic, the first visit by the King and Queen Consort, their first state visit, and this being done even before the coronation, a sign of how important the government regards this visit.
Oh, absolutely, Andrew. Good morning. This is the power of soft diplomacy in action here. We saw yesterday the King's ceremonial welcome, which he received, and the Queen Consort, of course, at the Brandenburg Gate, the first head of state in history, actually, to receive such a welcome at that location. But perhaps the main talking point was the magnificent state banquet at Bellevue Palace, hosted by the German president. It was a white tie affair. I'm told that's incredibly rare, actually, for German formal occasions, which perhaps gives a sense of just how important this visit is to German officials. But today, the King is expected to be at the Chancellery. He's expected to arrive imminently here, the official residence of the German Chancellor, and he is expected to take part in a bilateral meeting with the Chancellor here. He's going to be greeted. There is a red carpet out ready and waiting for him. I don't know if you can see it on the different shots to where I am, but it's all tying into this idea strengthening relations between both Britain and Germany. Of course, Buckingham Palace decides where to send the King on a state visit, particularly such an important one as this, being his first state visit of the new reign, on government advice, which indicates that the government felt it was more important for Britain to perhaps strengthen ties with our closest neighbours in Europe, rather than a Commonwealth nation. The police escort is just arriving. I think King Charles is expected to arrive imminently here for the bilateral talks with the Chancellor of Germany. There is expected to also be a short a guard of honour inside as well. The King just arriving very shortly. I don't know if you can see that on your shot.
You can.
But he's expected to spend a little bit of time here, and then he's going to go on to the German Bundestag, the German Parliament, to become the first British monarch to address the German politicians. That speech is expected to be historical and expect.
Sorry, Cameron.
Sorry,
I was just going to say, we're looking at the pictures there. For anybody listening on the radio, it's a sort of paved area with 3 very tall European-style flags in the background. But where exactly are you?
So we're outside. I'm going to have to whisper, Bev, I'm afraid. I'm being told to be a bit quiet. But we are outside. The German King is just arriving. It's the official residence of the German Chancellor. I'm afraid I'm going to have to hand back to you, Bev. I'm being told to stop broadcasting.
All right, that's Cameron Walker, our royal reporter in Germany, on the King and Queen Consort's first state visit. They're just arriving at the official residence of the German Chancellor, who is Olaf Scholz. They'll be quite pleased to see him because he was a conspicuous absentee last night from the state dinner because he's got a coalition and it's messy. And he was spending time fixing the coalition rather than being at the official dinner where we heard the King speaking in German. And I spotted in that dinner Angela Merkel. She didn't look very happy.
She didn't look very happy. She's in the background.
Who was, of course, the German Chancellor for 15 years.
Yeah, a cavalcade of about 25 motorbikes in front there. I think we're just watching the pictures here of King Charles and the Queen Consort arriving at the red carpet.
In the maroon Rolls-Royce, which has been flown in especially.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So much for the green agenda. He's just flown his Rolls-Royce
and
to Germany.
there is the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, shaking hands. He's running this coalition government. He's a shadow on the international stage compared to Angela Merkel, who was a dominant figure in Europe for 15 years. And they'll have a lot to talk about. Green issues, of course. And he will go heavily briefed, Bev, whatever government wants him to say to the German Chancellor.
Yeah.
Let's bring in, we're going to talk now to, who are we going to talk to? We're going to talk to Pandora, aren't we?
I think so. Joining us now is Daily Express Royal Roundup podcast host Pandora Forsyth. Good morning, Pandora. I don't know whether you can see these pictures of King Charles and Camilla arriving in Germany and in Berlin at the Chancellor's with Olaf Scholz. Just reflect for a moment. We mentioned that you're from the Daily Express. That is a newspaper which does a huge amount of coverage of the royals still to this day. Do you sense that the appetite for royal stories amongst the British public is as strong as it ever was, if not better?
100%. I think also the fact that they still make front pages on our paper as well as lots of others does show there's an appetite for it because people have got opinions on them. They haven't been able to stay away from any royal stories which have been coming up, especially in the past couple of years. But all of the coverage so far from this monumentous visit has been extremely positive, and the reaction in Germany and the UK and even from the US has been great. So I'm sure the monarch will be very, very happy about this, and also fantastic pictures coming through from there with a great welcome.
It's interesting, Pandora, they've got them there already. We haven't had the coronation yet. That's not till May. A measure of how important the government regards relations with Germany and how important they regard Charles and Camilla as part of Cameron Walker saying to deploy the soft power, which is what the monarchy's all about.
Echoing Cameron's point there, very much soft power play here. He knows that he can't step too much into politics, but he can be in a room with people who can, have a say in politics. This is huge. Let's not underestimate just because of the fact that he can't actually put his foot too much in the water. He can definitely talk about issues such as sustainability, which he did speak about last night, organic farming and such. And he is also a massive fan of the country. It was 3 years ago, I think, since the last time that he went there for a visit. I think one of the gifts that the president gave him yesterday was a picture of him and his late father, Prince Philip, when he was a young boy, when he was in one of the visits across there, which was very sweet. So he's had a long relationship with the country. So, you know, he's not going in completely blind, and I'm sure this will be one of many visits that he does make there. But of course, as you said, this comes in the coronation year. So the fact that he's going there before the coronation, I think, cements the fact that he does value this relationship a lot.
Pretty good at German, from what I could tell, too, Pandora. That will have impressed his host, won't it? He seemed to be fluent and word perfect, although I have to confess I don't speak a word of German apart from Sprechen Sie Deutsch, but I'm sure his hosts would have been flattered that he did speak in German.
Oh, 100%. And he would have made sure that he was saying everything down to a T. I'm sure there was lots of practices there, but I'm sure he's known the German language for a few years now. And that, again, is a sign of respect, you see, obviously speaking their language. And they very much would have appreciated that. And the Queen Consort has been by his side throughout the entire trip, which, again, cements their relationship in this year and shows that he really does want the Queen Consort. She's really stepping into her role now to be taken seriously alongside him. They make a great team, and I'm sure all of the publicity which is coming from this is being positive, and this is something his advisors will be very happy about at Buckingham Palace.
I'm just looking at what else they're going to be doing today, Pandora. About just after 10 o'clock, they're going to be meeting the outgoing Berlin mayor and the state premier at Wittenbergplatz Square. I presume that's how it's pronounced.
Very well.
And then at 10:15, they're going to see a fruit and vegetable market with the outgoing mayor as well, which will be lovely. I'm sure there'll be some beautiful pictures of that. And then I think about 10 to 12, King Charles is meeting Ukrainian refugees housed at an arrival centre at Berlin's former Tegel airport. So royal occasion, but also some geopolitics in there as well, as we would expect.
100%. This will have all been A-okayed and green-lighted from him. He'll want to make most of every single moment whilst he's there. It's a 3-day visit. He wants to make sure that the issues which are spoken about, if they do make it into the press, we're speaking about it right now, are issues that he feels extremely passionate about. Obviously, going to a farmer's market there, and also, of course, the terrible situation within Ukraine, which I know not only him, obviously, being the monarch, has spoken about before, but his son, the Prince of Wales, as well, he has been very, very vocal about this. So I have no doubt that this will be referenced throughout the trip in any more speeches that he makes to make sure that people are aware that he is very aware of the situation which is happening across there, and he's not being completely blind to it, because when it does come down to the coronation, it'll be a few days of celebrations, you see, across for that bank holiday weekend. And I'm sure that he knows, obviously, the cost of living crisis as well, with everyone's bills going up. So I think he wants to reflect a modern monarchy, and he does want to be in touch with the issues which are happening across the world right now.
All right, that's Pandora Forsyth. She's the host of the Daily Express Royal Podcast. Thanks. And, of course, the King, you must remember he's the King, is addressing the German Parliament this morning. First time ever by a British monarch, so we will be taking that live. Now,
can I just say,
yeah,
he's also visiting an eco-village outside Berlin. I can't square that.
With his roller.
With him flying out his Rolls-Royce.
There we are. He wants to travel in style.
Well,
and of course, it's got all the royal pennants and all the royal stuff on it.
But it's just not remotely necessary. Don't they have cars in Germany? They're pretty good at making cars the last time I looked at Germany.
They make quite a lot. They do. Well, we'll talk about that. We can talk to Cameron about that. Now, it's a big day because the government is confirming its drive to net zero, which is driving a lot of you mad who are watching and listening. It's going to put up our energy bills by hundreds of pounds every year.
That's right. Energy Secretary Grant Shapps will unveil this plan. It's being dubbed Powering Up Britain. He had a visit to a nuclear fusion development facility in Oxford today. So joining us now for the latest is the founder of Fairfuel UK, Howard Cox. Morning, Howard. In fact, let me ask you first of all about the two stories kind of fit beautifully together, don't they? Prince Charles out there, able to take his big, I presume it's a gas guzzler, it might be electric for all I know, Rolls-Royce. King Charles, still doing it. And yet, here we are being penalised repeatedly over our cars, our fuel bills. What do you make of this new announcement about the net zero project?
Well, good to be on your show. Thank you for having me on. As usual, I mean, we're living in this Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale or a pipe dream of trying to achieve net zero without actually hurting the public. And as you know, I fight for drivers, and the particular journey on the way to net zero is to ban new diesel and petrol cars in 2030. The whole thing is a complete and utter sham. It's going to cost people huge amounts of money. The diesel and petrol ban, for example, will cost 5 times the alleged environmental benefits. And that's an independent study by the CEBR. Now, I just don't understand where Grant Shapps is coming from. Most of Europe is now looking at moving their 2035, 5 years later than us in banning diesel and petrol cars. They're considering moving that to 2040 and also using synthetic fuels rather than relying totally or being pushed into driving electric vehicles, which we're doing here at 2030. I'm told it's because we want to lead the world.
It's fascinating. I'm glad you mentioned that, Howard, because we left the European Union. I was one of those who was delighted to vote for Brexit because we could make our own way, make our own laws. And yet here we are now. We see the EU are going wobbly on net zero, as you say, probably going to move the ban on petrol and diesel cars to 2040. And we're pressing ahead with it, despite the fact we know it's going to cost huge amounts of money. At the same time, we're going to have to start getting rid of our gas boilers, and the front page of the Daily Telegraph today says you're going to be penalised if you continue to use gas rather than electricity.
Well, there's the operative word. We're going to be penalised. We're going to be hit hard. And we haven't been consulted. We haven't been... and I've always said this. You know that we're 1% of emissions in terms of what's the bad stuff that's being emitted in the world. We're responsible for 1%. Why are we doing all of this? I think it's pure virtual signalling BS, and I'm fed up to the back teeth with it, and so are my millions of supporters.
And they're saying this, the Telegraph is saying, the proposals, which we will probably get later today, they're publishing 18 pages, 18 different documents, Howard, in this so-called Green Day. It's going to put up gas bills by a further £100 a year.
And that's ridiculous. How are people going to afford that? I mean, we're looking at a government that's in 70 years we're the highest taxed we've ever been. We're still the highest taxed drivers in the world, virtually, etc. Yes, I'm pleased we've got a nice freezing fuel duty, but why wasn't electric vehicles taxed? They use the roads too, and they're heavier. All sorts of things don't add up, and I'm afraid I'm going to be campaigning hard to try and stop all of this, and certainly to try and scrap the 2030 ban.
There's an amazing story, I don't know whether you've seen it, Howard, about the community in Whitby that were having hydrogen-powered boilers effectively put into their houses. It's a trial for the rest of the country. And the public pushed back, and the local residents caused such a fuss. I mean, town hall meetings, they really went out. It was real Erin Brockovich stuff. It was real David and Goliath. And they've managed now to push back so much that they are not going to be obliged to have hydrogen power in their house. Is that the only solution, that people have to come together?
Well, absolutely. People power is what happens. This is one reason why we've got 13 years of fuel duty freeze. I've been, Andrew's known that, I've been going on since Noah's Ark. I've been going on campaigning on this. But what we need to do is to come together. The big thing is both parties, the major parties, must ask the public and get them involved in this so they can buy into their pipe dream of reality. And I'm afraid that it isn't a reality. It cannot be achieved. All it's going to do is hurt people in the pocket and businesses in the pocket. It's going to be a terrible catastrophe.
Howard, you know the answer to that. If they asked the public what they thought, net zero, the drive for net zero, it would be 2050, not 2030.
Well, I think they would. We don't need to. We do need to pursue cleaner fuels, all those sorts of things, but allow technology to work on its own. We've got plenty of technology. In the last 10 years, Andrew, Beverley, what's happened with the HGV industry? In the last 10 years, they've halved their emissions. Just imagine what we can do to 2030. We could probably halve them again. So we do not need powerful edicts, and we do not need big brother politics. And certainly, idiot politicians come out saying this is the way we're going.
I don't know whether you heard Grant Shapps this morning doing some of the rounds being interviewed about this, Howard, but sometimes when these politicians talk about these complicated sort of technological or scientific issues, you just get the impression that they're quite sort of easily led, maybe by scientists who come in and they say, this is going to be amazing and it's going to change the world and you're going to be responsible for saving the planet. And I'd just like them to be a little bit more cynical and sceptical. Listening to him talk about carbon capture, I wasn't sure he knew what he was talking about. Were you?
Well, I understand carbon capture. I've been looking at it. It's a good thing. But the point is, we've painted carbon to be this horrible thing. Carbon dioxide is the food for all our plants. We wouldn't be able to eat if we didn't have carbon dioxide. We need a balance. Yes, we do. But the point is, it's not man-made, the problem. What we need to do is work on clean fuel technology, both for gas, electricity, for cars, you name it, and evolve without a ban. And that's the big thing. People don't like being told what to do when, quite honestly, as you quite rightly pointed out, Beverley, these people don't understand the science at all. They are being led by people in Lycra and the very well-financed green campaigning groups.
What do you mean by that? I can't imagine.
Yeah,
Howard
just to
Cox.
clarify, if you're wondering what he's getting at, he's talking about cyclists.
Certainly is. Certainly is. Howard
Thank
Cox
you,
from
Howard.
Earth Fuel UK. Thanks for joining us. Now, Dominic Raab, who is, of course, the Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, he's holding further talks with the European Court of Human Rights because he's trying to block them having powers to stop deportation flights, for instance, of asylum seekers to Rwanda.
Is this still going on? How much longer are we going to talk about the ECHR doing this? Dominic Raab said he received positive response to his first meeting as the government continues to push its illegal migration bill through Parliament. Just to be clear, the bill isn't illegal, the migration is illegal.
Yeah. Now, joining us now to talk about this is from the Refugee and Asylum Rights Director for Amnesty International, Steve Valdez-Simmons. Steve, morning to you. I guess you're a little depressed that the government's pressing ahead with this plan, if they can, to effectively say to the European Court, you've blocked one flight to Rwanda, but we're determined to stop you doing it again.
I think the government is playing us for fools. And to pick up on the comment that has just been made, there is plenty of provision in this bill that frankly is contrary to international law. The migration of people who come seeking asylum is not illegal. It is perfectly permitted in international law, and it is our obligation, like every other nation's, to receive claims, consider them, and grant protection to people who are entitled to it. And of course the court cannot provide the sort of nonsense guarantees that Dominic Raab and other ministers say they are seeking, because the court cannot say in advance that it will sanction what the government may do. It can only rule on what is done, when it is done, according to law, which is what it does do.
But what Dominic Raab is saying on behalf of the government, Steve, as you know, is that it should be a matter for the British courts to decide whether to block these deportations, not an anonymous judge in a Strasbourg court. As we know in this particular case, we don't even know the identity of the judge late one night. He wants to stop that and leave it a matter for the British judiciary and Parliament.
Well, he can't do that, and the court can't sanction that either. Certainly the court can talk to him about the procedures that are put in place to ensure that the British government has its opportunity to have its say in front of the court, and everyone can be more satisfied with that. But the court is there responsible for the convention that this country is a party to. And yes, if the British courts are permitted to rule on these questions, and the government is passing legislation to prevent them ruling on these questions, then it is less likely that anything will ever have to get to the court. But if you take away all that, even more matters will have to go to the court, which is ultimately responsible for the convention the UK has signed.
OK. Well, can I just ask you what the solution would be? Oh, Steve, I don't think we've got time to talk to you. We barely scratched the surface. Steve, come back another day. Steve Valdez there from Amnesty International.
We did talk to
UK,
Howard Cox for
Steve
quite a
Valdez
long time,
Simmons.
but I think our viewers and listeners are very cross about net zero, as am I, as are you.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, up next, we're going to be right back in Berlin for the latest on the King's first state visit to Germany. More of that in the next hour. You're with GB News. First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 10 o'clock and welcome to The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
So coming up today, the government have promised to power up Britain as they publish their green energy plan. Carbon capture technology and offshore wind will form the pillars of the policy. But is it enough to drive down your energy bills?
Oh, you all know it's going to put them up, of course. And the government is also facing more pressure from Tory MPs to stop the European Court of Human Rights meddling in our migration policy. Dominic Raab, the Justice Secretary, is holding further talks with the court to guarantee that bill won't be challenged when it's been signed into law. Good luck with that.
Yeah, you just beat me too. I was going to say that. The King has pledged to strengthen ties with Germany as he continues his state visit of Germany today. Charles will become the first ever British monarch to address the German Parliament as he addresses both climate change, of course, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
And this is so depressing. Schools are allowing pupils to change their names and uniforms, changing their gender, without telling their parents. Dangerous gender ideology, or are we allowing young people to take control of their lives?
Well, I'll let you know what I think about that in the rest of the show. Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. Lots more to come. Two great guests are going to be in the studio soon as well. First of all, though, here's your news with Rhiannon Jones.
Good morning. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 10. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The government's set to announce plans to cut greenhouse gases and lower energy costs. The new net zero plan, called Powering Up Britain, will invest in renewables and nuclear in a bid to make the country less reliant on foreign energy supplies. Investment will go into carbon capture technology and offshore wind, as well as hydrogen production. Energy Secretary Grant Shapps told GB News the UK can have a leading role in green energy, but Shadow Levelling Up Minister Alex Norris says the proposals are nothing new.
Want to see Britain be a clean energy superpower. That's what the Americans are going for. They want, as always, they're looking at new markets, and this is going to be a huge new market over the next few decades, and they want to be dominant in it. And I think we should be seeking to do that as well, particularly in the clean energy space. I actually agree with some of the points made by Grant about carbon storage. That's a real opportunity. But actually today, what we've heard from the government, it's the same old press releases revived, and we were being told they're a revolution, they're anything but, particularly disappointing with an absence of onshore wind.
It comes as the Chancellor accuses President Biden of protectionism over his plan to offer green tax breaks to American car manufacturers. Jeremy Hunt is concerned the levies could wipe out the UK's £4.3 billion car export market to the US. Energy Secretary Grant Shapps says the US is cutting the UK out of the already competitive green market. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is set to announce his party will freeze council tax bills this year. He's set to unveil the pledge as he launches Labour's local elections campaign in Swindon later. The move will be funded by a windfall tax on the profits of oil and gas companies. The Standards Committee has recommended MP Margaret Ferrier be suspended for 30 days for breaching COVID rules. The Rutherglen and Hamilton West MP could face a by-election as a result of the suspension. Ms Ferrier took part in a Commons debate in September 2020 whilst awaiting the results of a COVID test. She then travelled back to Scotland by train after receiving a positive result instead of isolating. Around £21 billion has been lost by the government through fraud since the start of the COVID pandemic. The National Audit Office says that's 4 times the amount lost in the previous 2 years. Just over £7 billion of that relates to schemes introduced by the government during the pandemic, such as employment support. The spending watchdog warns it's very unlikely the majority of taxpayers' money will be recovered. A government spokesperson, though, says they're overhauling how they tackle public sector fraud, and that more than £3 billion has been recovered in the last 2 years. 3 people have been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder after 2 men were shot dead in Cambridgeshire last night. Police say the incidents in Sutton and Bluntisham were linked and targeted. A shotgun and a car believed to have been used in the attacks have since been recovered. The jury in the trial of the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell has begun its second day of deliberations. 34-year-old Thomas Cashman has been accused of shooting the schoolgirl in her home in Liverpool last August. He's also accused of injuring her mother. Cashman has denied the charges and says he was at a friend's house at the time of the shooting. King Charles has arrived at the Bundestag, where he'll become the first British monarch to address the German Parliament. The German president hailed the visit as a new chapter in relations between his country and the UK yesterday during a state banquet in Berlin. President Steinmeier thanks the king for choosing Germany as his first foreign visit as head of the royal family, describing it as a tremendous personal gesture. And ever wondered what one of the biggest creatures ever to walk the earth might have looked like? Well, very soon you'll be able to. Replica skeleton of the Patago Titan Majorum is about to go on display at the Natural History Museum in London. The giant belongs to the group known as the Titanosaurs and was discovered nearly 10 years ago in South America. It's the most complete gigantic dinosaur ever discovered. And to give you an idea of just how big it was, it weighed in at a whopping 57 tonnes. That's about 8 times heavier than a T-Rex. My sons will love that. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning. Stay with us throughout the morning. We'll be live in Berlin covering the King and Queen consort's first royal state visit.
But first, households using gas instead of electricity, they're going to be penalised by hundreds of pounds as part of a new government energy strategy being announced. It's all part of this mad dash to net zero.
So we look like we're sat very far apart. This isn't deliberate. Do you mind if I just move my chair? I don't want to look like I'm not sat next to Andrew.
She doesn't like my aftershave.
I think somebody moved the chairs in the break. Anyway, Energy Secretary Grant Shapps will unveil this plan. It's dubbed Powering Up Britain during a visit to a nuclear fusion development facility in Oxford today. So joining us for more on this is political reporter Olivia Otley. Good morning, Olivia. They're making such a fuss about this, aren't they? They love this. I don't think it's that popular with the public.
Yeah, so the new energy measures being brought forward today, Labour say that they're just a rehashing of previous measures, and actually they don't go as far as many Green campaigners were hoping for.
Good. Can I just say, good?
That said, essentially what they're doing is swapping round the subsidies. So at the moment, gas is subsidised by the government, and now electricity will be subsidised by the government, which means basically that people who run their homes, that heat their homes by gas, are going to be penalised. And they're being encouraged to shift over to heat pumps. But obviously we know there are lots of...
And aren't most people's central heating powered by gas?
Well, absolutely.
I don't know anyone. And heat pumps cost £8,000.
Absolutely, and we know that there are lots and lots of problems with heat pumps. The installation is very, very expensive. They're very noisy, which has proved to be a big, big problem. People don't really understand how they work. There was a fascinating piece in, I think it was Politics Home yesterday, about how the concept of having a heat pump which is on all of the time is just such an anathema to people that the heat pump manufacturers have had to push in a switch which does nothing, just to try and get people to understand them. So it's a big push from the government to try and get people to switch over to electric-powered means of heating their homes, but it's a real uphill struggle.
It's just ridiculous. I'm having some work done on the house at the moment. I need a new boiler.
Right.
My boiler doesn't work.
Well, you'll have to get rid of it in 5-6 years' time.
That's right. So what do I do now? Do I buy a new gas boiler? I need one. We keep running out of hot water. But I looked into air source heat pumps, and they are, like you say, enormous. They're expensive and they're very difficult to retrofit on existing houses.
Yeah.
What they possibly should be doing, is there anything that in this today, Olivia, about building new houses? We should all have these eco features fitted as standard.
I mean, they are. Some of the houses that are being built at the moment are having these eco features fitted. As you say, it's very, very difficult to retrofit this kind of technology onto Victorian homes. Yeah. And obviously, there are still so many planning restrictions that the government isn't really engaging in a big housing drive. We know that from the budget last week. So, I mean, Labour suggests that this is kind of tinkering around the edges. The Tories say that it's a sort of free market approach to net zero, which some might argue is a bit of a contradiction in terms, but as opposed to Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which is all about subsidising, using taxpayer money to subsidise green energy companies, this strategy is supposed to be, the way they're billing it anyway, is that it's making it easier for people to invest in green technology by, for example, cutting regulation.
But it ignores the fact millions of homes in this country are Edwardian and Victorian, which are already a problem to insulate. So when these Insulate Britain fanatics start banging on about insulation, they don't know the cost. And they admit many homes, it's very difficult to insulate. And it's going to be the same with this heat pump technology.
Yes, and critics of the measures in general suggest that the government is sort of acting in a way that they wish the world was.
We're seeing they're on a walkabout now. That's Queen Consort, Camilla, and the King. They're in Berlin. They've had a meeting already with Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, who couldn't make it to the official state dinner last night, which I thought was rather odd, because he had a few problems to deal with. And where are they on their way to next?
What time is it?
They're just going to see the Berlin mayor. Go on, you pronounce that square.
Wittenbergplatz, I think it is. Wittenbergplatz
And then they're on their
Square.
way to a fruit and vegetable market. In fact, I think that's where they're going to now with the state premier, Francisco Giffey. And there are big crowds out there to see them, Bev, which I think is quite encouraging.
We were reflecting, weren't we, on the fact that actually, as much as sometimes people can be a little bit dismissive of the royal family and say they're a bit anachronistic and we don't really need them anymore, when you go to countries like Germany that don't have a royal family, you actually realise actually I quite like having
And
one.
Eamon Holmes asked us when we were talking about the programme, so he said, what's the name of the German Chancellor? We both looked at each other.
Yeah.
No clue. And then we couldn't remember the name of the Irish president either.
Yeah.
He's very small, with white hair, and he's very charming.
And that's right. So you think, well, do we want a president? No. Tony Blair would be elbowing himself into that position, wouldn't he?
Boris Johnson.
Yeah. Or do we want our royal family? And I think, you know, the royal family are, at the moment, they're doing a good job, despite Harry's
Olivia,
best
they're
efforts.
there in Germany at the behest of the government. It's unusual that they're on this state visit before the coronation. Clearly, the government were keen for them to get across the channel post-Brexit. Initially, it's supposed to be France. Mr Macron screwed that up, didn't he, because of the riots. But Germany, a very important ally.
Yes, definitely. And this is great for Rishi Sunak, who is now trying to sort of consolidate the gains he made in improving relationships with the EU that he secured when he agreed that Windsor framework.
Yeah.
So all of his mission over the last few months, if you like, has been to try and re-engage with his foreign affairs mission has been to re-engage with EU countries and to repair some of those broken relationships. So, of course, Boris Johnson was unable to say whether President Macron was a friend or a foe when he was Prime Minister. Liz Truss was pretty unpopular with Macron as well, and and Rishi Sunak is hoping to reset that relationship, and this royal state visit will do some good there.
Yeah, and he speaks German. He speaks German very well, and they appear to be very popular. Big crowds are turning out for them.
There is the market.
There is the market, yeah, and so it's ticking a box. There was some surprise, Olivia, that the first state visit wasn't to a Commonwealth country because the King, of course, is head of state in 15 countries. But I think this is a reflection, again, of how important the Prime Minister and the Foreign Office see rebuilding our relations with Europe, not putting Rishi as a Brexiteer, apparently, but this is what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, there is King Charles has been confirmed that he will be the head of the Commonwealth. There was a bit of a question mark over that for a while, over whether he would succeed his mother, exactly, until the Queen stepped in. So it might be that it's felt that kind of Britain's relationship with the Commonwealth is now sort of solidified, and the soft power quest that must be kind of achieved at the moment is to close together those relationships with the EU, which have been damaged over recent years. So I think this is a pretty powerful.
It's interesting that you said Liz Truss, because, of course, he's already on his second Prime Minister, the King.
Absolutely.
And, of course, the Queen, was it 15? She saw Winston Churchill being the first one. And we'll never know what goes on in those audiences, but the King would have known Rishi anyway, because as Prince of Wales, he'd have regularly had audiences with him as Chancellor of the Exchequer.
I'm just having a look at where they are. I'm looking where they are. They're at Wittenbergplatz Square. This is in the central district of Berlin. It has the market, and it has also apparently the largest department store in continental Europe.
Would you be in there like a shop?
No, I don't.
Is that a sexist thing to ask?
No, it's not a sexist thing to ask at all.
I like department stores, actually.
I don't like them too big.
Like a shop.
Yeah, but I don't like them too big.
No.
I think the largest department store would slightly stress me out. I like a little one. But we're looking at the market as well. It has a famous fruit and vegetable market.
Will they buy something? They will, for the photographers, for the cameras, and of course there'll be no cash, so a flunky will have to reduce the cash. Which brings us seamlessly onto a debate we're having later in the programme. In favour of cash or not cash, because, of course, more and more banks are trying to get rid of cash. Olivia, thanks for
Olivia.
that. We will talk to you a little later about the SNP MP who's been suspended from the Commons for 30 days for breaking COVID rules.
Margaret Ferrier.
2 years ago. What is that Privileges Committee doing? It's taken two years to
investigate.
And they've suspended her for 30 days. How long is it going to take them to rule on Boris Johnson?
Well,
if it takes 2.5 years on something involving...
And it's a very brutal report that they've delivered on Margaret Ferrier, so very interesting why it did take them so long when the result is so decisive.
It means, doesn't it, that there could be a recall, they could trigger a by-election in her constituency.
Yes, and Labour has her constituency as one of their top targets, and it looks like a by-election now is almost certain.
Yeah, and that'd be a test for the new SNP leader. Hamza Yusuf, known by everybody as Hamza Eustace.
Yeah. Right, thanks, Olivia. OK, moving on. The Deputy Prime Minister will hold further talks with the European Court of Human Rights as he seeks to overturn the court's power to block further deportation flights taking asylum seekers to Rwanda.
So Dominic Raab says he's had a positive response to his meeting as the government continues to push its illegal migration bill through Parliament. You know what they're trying to do? They're trying to stop the boats. So joining us now for more on this is the social policy analyst, Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Morning to you. We're struggling to hear you, I think. Can we hear you?
Can you hear us, Dr. Ehsan? Yeah, I think he can hear us. Let's see. There we go.
We were talking earlier to somebody from, was it Amnesty we were talking to?
Yes, Amnesty.
Saying that the European Court's got to keep its responsibility in this area. It's a simple matter, isn't it? The government is saying it should be a matter for the British courts, and other European countries completely ignore the rulings of the European Court of Human Rights. Why can't we?
Could I just say quickly that you can hear me properly?
We can now.
OK, fantastic. So I think that the key debate here is what should the UK's relationship be with the ECHR? I think that when you look at the illegal migration bill, Andrew, as I've said previously, I do think that it's a step in the right direction, especially from the Nationality and Borders Act. But the bill also clearly states that there's reservations even within government regarding its compatibility with international law. And I think that when you look at the current context, when you look at the direction that the government is going in, it does seem like Prime Minister Sunak, for example, is looking to rebuild relations with France. I think that part of his post-Brexit foreign policy strategy is trying to move away from the appearance of being isolationist and trying to be more involved in inclusive alliances. So I think that the issue here for the government is that, of course, it wants to shore up our border security, but at the same time, the only way that it may be able to do that is to detach itself from international obligations.
But lots of other European countries do this all the time, and the criticism you hear all the time on the Conservative benches is that this decision to block the flight to Rwanda was taken by an anonymous judge. We don't even know what country the judge came from, no name of the judge, late at night, who had very few details.
No, absolutely. And I think many people will see that as an unacceptable situation in the post-Brexit environment. They'll see this wholly undemocratic. They might even see it as foreign judges overruling our domestic judges, considering the High Court ruling over the UK-Rwanda migration partnership. So there's many things for the government to consider. I think in terms of the legal migration bill, because of the risk of it being mired in legal challenges, I think in terms of its workability, I'm not entirely convinced.
OK. All right, thank you, Dr. Rakib Ehsan.
It wasn't a very good line, was it?
It wasn't great, but it's so frustrating, isn't it? It's like Rishi Sunak is so worried about upsetting his globalist pals.
I just
won't...
Look, they did it on prisoners' votes 4 or 5 years ago. The European Court said we had to give prisoners votes. Parliament spoke with one voice. 500 MPs said to the European Court, no, and that's exactly what happened there. And now you get a vote, I think, if you're on remand in prison, but apart from that, pretty much prisoners don't get votes because we asserted parliamentary sovereignty. We've left the European Union, we should do it again, and our courts should outrank the European Court. And if they don't, we've got a choice. We can leave the flipping convention.
Yeah, OK, right, let me know what you think. Still to come, we're going to be speaking to a couple. It's a really interesting story on the flip side of our immigration policy, actually. They're struggling to legally move to the UK after the government's crackdown on migration. They've got a new English-born baby and they're not allowed to live here. But anyway, we'll tell you about that in just a moment. This is To The Point on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's 10:23. You're with To The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Now, as the government continues to toughen up our migration policy for both illegal and legal migration, some families have been caught up and separated in the ongoing confusion. So we're delighted now to be joined by one couple who are currently stuck in Ireland due to the UK's harsh family reunification laws. Journalist Annabelle Fenwick-Elliott.
I think you meant Iceland.
What did I say?
Ireland.
I didn't mean Ireland. Thank you. I think I need to get some new glasses. I usually manage on that. Thanks, Andrew. I bet you wish you were in Ireland, though, guys. At least it would be a little closer to home. In Iceland, Annabelle Fenwick-Elliott and her fiancé, Julius Schultz. Good morning, both. Right, tell us how you found yourself in this position, Annabelle. What happened?
I was pretty naive and surprised when it happened, but we had a baby 8 months ago, and I assumed that would entitle Julius, who is German, to come and live with us in England. And we looked into it and quickly found out that we are completely ineligible because I don't make enough money. So they don't look at his income, they just look at mine, and I was on maternity leave, and I'm a freelancer. So I don't make enough money to qualify, therefore he can't come and live with us in England and the baby.
So you're a journalist, Annabelle, and a freelance existence has not been kind to many people, particularly in the last 2 to 3 years. So you are together, you're engaged to be married, you have your baby. Did you have your baby here in the UK?
Yeah.
And so then you just thought, well, Julius will come over and live with me. Yep. And then you start hitting the paperwork hurdles. Julius, tell us how it's been for you.
So far, to be honest, quite challenging in terms of getting into England as a complete family. Obviously, visit-wise, we don't have any issues whatsoever. But considering that I do need to find work, someone to provide for my family that I have now, it's quite challenging, I must say.
So you're a pilot?
Yeah, exactly. I'm a pilot, and the market is obviously always full, and even even though I would be on a skilled category, basically, to go as a worker into England or the UK, it's considerably challenging to even find something. And obviously, the grasp will be preferred to people who live in the UK already.
If you get married, guys, does anything change then?
No.
Really?
No. Again, I assume that would
be completely the same thing, and that's a surprising thing to me, because if you would look at places like the US, where it's also very challenging to get into, just by signing a paper, you could get into the country, but having a child together is super challenging.
So if you came back to Britain for a trip with your baby, which was born in Britain, and stayed for, I don't know how long you could stay for, and you overstayed your welcome, you could be deported.
Oh, yeah, he would absolutely be deported.
It's extraordinary.
It is really extraordinary. I think the thing that strikes me as well is how anti-family this policy is.
Yeah.
That's what I'm listening to. So, effectively, Annabelle, you had maternity leave, that you had a baby. You couldn't go out to work and earn a six-figure salary that might have qualified you to live here. So you've made the choice to prioritise your family, to prioritise your child, and now you're being penalised for that.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty tough.
And so what's the solution, guys? What's the way forward now?
We literally don't have one. I mean, unless I can make the income threshold somehow by myself with a baby, and and
this was £18,000 profit, wasn't it? Is that you had to?
It's £18,500, profit, and they don't take into consideration, even though he's the breadwinner in the scenario, they don't take into consideration his salary. So we're at a complete dead end. There's just no way around.
It does. It says a combined salary. It says a combined salary of £18,000 or something, where the crux lies, basically, because I can't make I can't benefit to these 18,000 because I do not earn in Great Britain pounds.
Yeah.
But if you came to Britain to live, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be very long before an airline hired you.
No. Yeah. It would be easy. If he had the right to live and work in the UK, which we thought would be pretty straightforward, then, he would be living in England, paying taxes, supporting us. Yeah.
Well, look, we've been talking this morning about the Stop the Boats policy the government's got, and we're all very glad that they're trying to get to grips with it. Does it stick in your craw somewhat that people crossing the channel illegally can be in Britain for 2-3 years, and often coming from countries where there's no war, there's no conflict, and then they're allowed to stay? And by the way, they're given money to stay too and put up in hotels, sometimes they're rather nice hotels.
Prioritise the families.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's very, obviously it's very, very, very frustrating. I think they're two completely separate issues, so I'm sort of careful not to conflate them. But obviously it does seem mad to me that, we're trying to go the legal route and be responsible and provide to the, UK economy, and we're being penalised for it.
Mm-hmm. What does your family think about this?
My family?
Yeah.
Well, they're pretty shocked as well. I think very surprised. It's particularly hard on my mum because I'm out in Iceland quite a lot to see him. And she would be a great help to me if I was there more. But again...
Because your baby is about 8 or 9 months now, Annabelle, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is.
So the grandparents are also missing out on the time with the grandchild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just the priorities of this are just all wrong, aren't they?
And yet they're talking, a lot of the talk, again, I know you don't want to get drawn into the controversy over to Stop the Boats, but often they go to great lengths if children arrive unaccompanied across the channel. They're given all sorts of priority treatment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sort of quite right. I don't think it's ever okay to separate children from their parents. I think it's inhumane. It staggers me. But I didn't know this, but the UK does have one of the worst reunification policies in the whole world for this. And if it wasn't for Brexit, obviously it would be easy for him. But even before Brexit, for everyone not in Europe, this has always been the way.
Have you taken it up with your MP, Annabelle?
No, not yet.
You should.
Yeah, I'll try.
No, you should. And we can help you with contacts if necessary.
What would your message be to the government now if they are listening to this?
I think that they need to radically look at the system for families and for English babies born in the UK, and the other parent, in our case, the father's right to be around and support them.
OK. Well, we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
I think it's a shocking story, and I'm very glad you brought it to us.
Yeah,
That's journalist Annabelle Fenwick and her fiancé, Julia Schultz. What's your baby called, by the way? Oh, we've lost them.
Oh, they've gone.
I wonder what the little boy was called.
I don't know. But, yeah, yeah.
And what a nice couple.
Well, lovely couple.
She's a journalist. Can work it. Oh, we're just going to ask you guys, what's your little boy called?
Jasper.
Ah, nice name.
Brilliant. Well, hopefully you'll be over here and settled and bring him in to see us, won't you?
I hope so.
Definitely.
That would be lovely.
We'll show you the birth certificate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Bring
exactly.
the birth certificate.
Well, I'm sure he's a lovely little boy, because you guys are lovely, I've got to tell you.
Yeah.
What a shocking
Thank you. Thank you.
Lovely to talk to you.
It's one of those post-Brexit silly loophole situations which hasn't been resolved.
I think we're going to put Annabelle in touch with her MP and apply some pressure.
We've got a labour shortage.
Could be a campaign issue for GB News.
Right, absolutely, couldn't agree more. OK, what's still to come this morning? We're going to be going back to Berlin for the latest on the King's state visit to Germany, plus two fantastic guests in the studio any minute now after your news.
Good morning. It's coming up to 10:33. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The government's set to announce plans to cut greenhouse gases and lower energy costs. The new net zero plan, called Powering Up Britain, will invest in renewables and nuclear in a bid to make the country less reliant on foreign energy supplies. Investment will go into carbon capture technology and offshore wind, as well as hydrogen production. Shadow Levelling Up Minister Alex Norris says the proposals are nothing new. It comes as the Chancellor accuses President Biden of protectionism over his plan to offer green tax breaks to American car manufacturers. Jeremy Hunt's concerned the levies could wipe out the UK's £4.3 billion car export market to the US. Energy Security Secretary Grant Shapps says the US is cutting the UK out of the already competitive green market and that countries need to work together to tackle the problem. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is set to announce his party will freeze council tax bills this year. He's set to unveil the pledge as he launches Labour's local elections campaign in Swindon. The move will be funded by a windfall tax on the profits of oil and gas companies. The Vatican says Pope Francis had a peaceful night in hospital after being admitted for a respiratory infection. It's understood the 86-year-old had complained of breathing difficulties in recent days. He was taken to the hospital in Rome for tests and doesn't have COVID. It's hoped he'll be discharged in time for Palm Sunday celebrations on April the 2nd. And the King's at Wittenbergplatz in Berlin on the second day of his first overseas trip as monarch. Accompanied by the Queen Consort, they're at an outdoor fruit and vegetable market with the Mayor of Berlin. Later, King Charles will become the first British monarch to address the German Parliament, the Bundestag. And we'll be following King Charles's movements throughout the day here on GB News. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Back to Andrew and Bev now.
Now, we'll be back in just a moment, but we're going to be looking at this morning's papers, including the story of children possibly being put at risk by gender ideology. This is To The Point on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10:38. It's to the point of GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. We're going to get some of your views. Patrick is not happy about the dash to net zero, nor are we, Patrick. Governments governed by consent, not edicts. This idiotic bunch have forgotten who pays their wages. The people.
That's right. Philip says, why isn't tidal energy generation used? Unlike wind, which doesn't always blow, in the sun, which doesn't always shine, tides always take place day in and day out.
And Alex says, I can't vote for this insane net zero agenda. Climate change is real, but there's no way average earning people can afford this. This government is toast. Trouble is, Alex, the Labour Party want to go eat just as quick, if not quicker, and don't start me on the Lib Dems and the Greens.
Yeah, and Joe says, I'm in social housing, I'm disabled, I've got a gas cooker and heating. How am I supposed to pay for all this? Landlords can't pay to fit all their homes quickly. And it's this idea, isn't it? A lot of you getting in touch with the idea that it just sort of seems to have been decided upon, that this is what we need to do without anybody really talking about it. The science is not settled, says Richard. It is known that only a few percentage of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are created by humans. Scientists are highly political. Their computer models are biased by the politics. They cannot be trusted.
Now we're going to the papers, which we love this part of the programme. We've got Anna McGovern, political commentator, and Sam Lister back from the Daily Express, political editor by popular demand. Huge story on the front of the Times. Got our Bev very irritated. Who wants to talk about it?
No, rightly so. I mean, it is, you know, this is about the rise of, well, the issues of how you deal with the rise of gender ideology in schools. And there's been a big report by Policy Exchange. They've used the Freedom of Information Act to investigate what's actually happening in schools. And they found some quite shocking statistics.
Yes.
Parents are not being told if their child decides to identify as a different gender. I mean, that's a huge thing.
In 40% of schools?
Yeah. I think it's possibly even more.
Yeah, I think actually 28% said they would tell a parent, which means 70% wouldn't.
And but then also some quite practical things. So
School loos are now often gender neutral, so that's a big thing for a girl, right? When you're going through that difficult time in your life, you don't want to be sharing a loo with a boy.
Particularly with a 17-year-old boy.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, who's with his high, you know, we know what 17-year-old boys are like, don't we? I mean, really difficult.
Yeah. So I think it's really an important piece of work. It's really exposed some of the issues around this subject.
And no lead from the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, who has got to get off the fence.
Yeah, and I think she is reviewing other kind of linked areas to this about how sex education is taught in schools, and there's some concerns around that. The sort of things about, you know, what actually are children being taught, because a lot of parents aren't being given the information about that. But I think on the back of this, you know, people will want this to be widened out into what's actually happening in this area.
The Policy Exchange have called this report asleep at the wheel. 28% of schools were reliably informing parents as soon as a child disclosed feelings of gender distress, but that means that the remainder, 2/3, are not. Anna?
Yes, I've actually worked at boarding school last couple of years, and I'm actually surprised that this is new information, because when I worked at the school, students were coming for the first time from international countries, and there were a couple of students that I knew that would come as their biological sex. So, for example, 2 students came as a biological women.
What age?
Age, I think they were 13.
Yeah.
Come in, they're biological women, and then when they were actually at the school, they actually then said, I identify as a man, and the teachers actually protected their identity and didn't tell the parents. Obviously, they were calling them by their male name, and they hid this. So imagine, obviously, you sending your kids to school for the first time.
Women, are they? They're girls.
Yeah, they're girls. That's the point.
Girls.
They're children.
They're vulnerable, confused girls.
And the point is, parents, they're not able to actually help or support their children because they don't know. And I think that's very dangerous.
The fundamental tenet of safeguarding a child is you never ask a child to keep a secret with a teacher. No. And what that's fundamentally doing is having a relationship between the teacher and the child, which is a secret that the parent doesn't know. And that sets a really dangerous precedent.
Yeah, absolutely. And it puts the parents in a really difficult position where they can't support their children. They're not able to step in. They're not able to support or help
not support them or tell them.
They shouldn't tell. Yeah, I wouldn't say support either.
Ridiculous gender
changes.
Yeah,
absolutely. And they're too young. That's the thing. It's like their brains, they're not obviously matured enough to make that decision. And I think rather than actually giving them the help that they need, because they would need help, they're actually encouraging this and hiding it from the parents, and it's despicable.
This is a big political issue, isn't it? Because the Labour Party are all over the place on this. Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish First Minister, she lost her job over this because of a ridiculous gender ID bill allowing people from 16 to change their gender without even talking to a doctor. Labour are all over the place on this. There's no clarity from the government. If there was, the country would cry out, but also politically it would make so much sense.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this report is it does have backing from a number of Conservative MPs and also from Labour MP Rosie Duffield.
Yeah.
Now, she has to fight the fight on her own in that party.
Yeah.
It also has the backing of Baroness Estelle Morris,
former Education Secretary
for Labour. But I thought it was interesting that only those two would put their name to this from the Labour Party because it's such a contentious issue. Now, I spoke to Keir Starmer last week about this issue.
You interviewed me in your paper, didn't
Yes, and I said to him, look, you know, you've seen what's happened in Scotland. What is Labour's position on this? And he definitely has shifted, because he admitted that you can't make changes on policies like this without taking the public with you, which is quite a significant shift from where he was a few months ago.
Yeah.
He's seen the political reality of this, and, you know...
But he's a dad. He's got teenage kids.
I've written a bit about this, about the trans industry, which will be on the GBNews website this afternoon, because I feel really strongly about this. There's money to be made in this business, Anna. This is the problem. The sort of trans industrial complex, as we're calling it, is very profitable in America, and it will create children who will be, if they do change their gender, they are the perfect customer for Big Pharma because they're on hormones for life. It's a subscription service.
Absolutely. And this is something that they'll keep capitalising off from. And I think social media has a bit, you know, they're really, you know, pushing this out for children because there's young children, like there's a family that I follow, it's called the Sacco and Jolies, and their little child, called, I think it was a biological male called Jonathan. now identifies as a girl, aged 7 years old, and is now going through gender therapy to begin the process of becoming a girl at 7. And I think that's so despicable. And the parents are actually broadcasting this all over social media to help other young children who possibly are feeling the same way feel like they're not alone. But actually, it's the parents who are, sort of broadcasting it. Yeah, they're monetising, they're capitalising off their children's mental health problems.
To go back to the report, the most important recommendation here is that it says parents should automatically be told when a child discloses feeling of gender distress at school. Who gave the schools the right to think they know better than a parent? I mean, it shouldn't have to be written,
I think it is quite difficult for schools, though, because they're in such a difficult position. I mean, everybody is wrestling with how to deal with this because nobody wants to be accused of being a bigot, and that is part of the problem, isn't it? Nobody wants to be accused of being a bigot.
I think the problem... Sorry, Sam, to interrupt you. I was going to say, I think the problem as well is because, obviously, I've got 3 kids who are in high school. One of them just left, but... When you deal with the department which has pastoral care or safeguarding at the centre about anything, and I have said to them, if there's anything with my children I want to know, they know, but as a parent, you have to say that. The assumption is that they might keep things from you, and there might be situations when it is in their interest. So if you have a child who is being abused by their parents and there's a difficult and chaotic household life, that child might need to know that there's someone at school who they can go to without somebody picking up the phone to dad who might punch them a bit that night.
But that's a minority, isn't it? Here we're talking about 72% of parents aren't being told.
Yeah, and I think parents will be shocked by that because you would expect to be this is a huge thing. These are things that can have ramifications for
watching this and listening to this thinking,
life.
Is it my child?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Am I going to have to ask my child when they get home from school? Are you changing your uniform? Are you changing? I mean, some of them are changing their uniform.
And
their
name. And also then if you change your uniform and your name and you say I'm now a girl or a boy, you then change which sports teams you're in.
Which
changing rooms you use, maybe.
I mean, this is the thing.
And we just had this move internationally, haven't we, to stop trans women competing in female sports. But at school now, it could be happening without mum and dad knowing. I think it's really, really important.
It is, isn't it? But like we say, there's a lot more to this. There's some very powerful forces at work. We're just watching pictures now of King Charles
He's arriving at the German Parliament. He's going to speak there. Of course, he will speak in German. The first ever British monarch to address the German Parliament. This is a great honour for the King. He's not even been crowned King yet, of course. That happens in May. We shouldn't be surprised, of course, that he can speak German because, of course, the royal family's origins are Germany. George I was born in Germany. George II was born in Germany. George III was the first member of the House of Hanover to be born in England. So we have a long association with Germany. So that's the King arriving.
That's right.
Dressed in a nice pale suit.
He's on schedule. German Parliament President.
And the Queen is just alongside him. Oh, she stood in front of him. Very naughty. Don't do that, Camilla. Oh dear, one step behind.
President Barbel Bass apparently is receiving King Charles at the Bundestag, where he's going to sign the guest book.
She's changed clothes again. That's another. I suppose she'd have about 9 different coats, won't she? She looked rather nice, I thought, when she arrived in that blue coat. I wasn't so sure about that frock that's on the front pages of the newspapers. What did you think?
I haven't seen the frock. The diamond. She had a lot of bling. It was bling, royal bling, wasn't it? Yes. I quite like. I think she looks beautiful.
She was wearing the Queen Mother's tiara and the Queen's necklace, so a tribute to the last 2 queens.
King Charles is going to be speaking in a little while, so I think we're going to take some of that live. Let's carry on. Sam, your story in the Express today about
Good story on the front page. Another scoop.
Always try my best to get the news first.
You always get the splash when you're in the studio with us, which we approve
time it that way.
Splash being the front page. So what's happening on pensions?
So there's going to be an announcement in the Commons today. Mel Stride, the Work and Pensions Secretary, is going to announce that he's effectively kicking the decision into the long grass about when to bring forward the increase in the state pension age. So
I'll retire at 67. This is the plan to
make it 68. Now, there was quite a lot of wrangling in the government, put it that way. The Treasury wanted it to come down to 2037 to save billions of pounds. Mel Stride wanted it to be in the 2040s. And instead what they've done is decide, well, we won't make a decision now, we'll do it after the election.
Funny that, because I mean, a lot of young people probably think this doesn't matter. But I mean, I always thought I would be retiring at 65. I'm retiring at 67.
Yeah. And I'm part of the group who would have been hit by the rise to 68. So
the King's now being shown around with the Queen. They're trying to look interested.
Oh, this is the book this is probably the book that I guess he's going to sign, isn't it? There was something in the paper today about the fact that he's taken his own pen this time. Do you remember there was...
Got very cross, didn't he?
He got very cross when his pen leaked.
Council.
That's what it was. I was trying to remember the occasion.
Succession Council, when he formally became king, he showed how touchy he can be, actually. Let's not gild it too much.
It was a stressful day.
But you've never seen the Queen lose her rag
No,
in
you
public,
wouldn't.
did you ever? So
No.
they've disappeared out of view now, so I guess he's getting ready to deliver that speech, and when he does, we'll have more on that, and we'll be hoping to talk to Cameron Walker, who is our royal reporter at some point. So this is quite clever politics again by the Tories, isn't it?
It is.
Into touch.
Yeah, essentially it's to do with life expectancy.
Yeah.
They thought life expectancy was going to continue increasing. Instead, it's fallen.
Because of COVID.
Because of COVID. Well, actually, no, this is pre-COVID, so the figures were already falling.
Yeah.
What they're saying is actually we need to work out if COVID has had an impact, and maybe that will bring it down further. So
Because it's nothing to do with that.
It's not.
It's because they don't want to upset lots of 20-something people. Think, how many more years am I going to have to work before I get my pension?
All those people in the 40s and 50s who would be affected by this decision are obviously, they're the people who turn out to vote now.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to upset those people.
No.
Why would you tell those people, right, actually, your retirement age is going to come forward by 12 years?
Anna, this is a long way from your particular frame of reference at the moment, retirement. But how do you feel about the idea that they might be playing around with this policy just to win some votes?
I think at the moment they're going to try and do anything they can to win any votes, because I think a lot of people, they've lost trust in the government. We, you know, again, with as we were talking about just COVID and everything, with the lockdown, we just had Partygate. A lot of people have lost trust on the government because a lot of the lies and hypocrisy that's happening, particularly during that lockdown period, I think that's a real contention point for many people. So I think they'll try and do anything to try and claw away at those votes.
Can you persuade them then to abandon the madness of net zero?
I hope so.
You may agree, but I completely...
Oh, no, I absolutely would hope so. I think
2030. I mean, why are they banging on still with that, Sam? Big day today, Green Day, 18 different documents today.
Yeah.
And they're giving it some silly expression, but this is about taxing us even more.
Yeah, and also like the heat pump thing, it's become such a big issue because actually, when push comes to shove, most houses will not be suitable for heat pumps.
That's right.
So why are we kind of going down this route?
They also cost, on average,
we have
£8,000. And how much is it to put one in, Bev?
I looked at putting one on my house. It's a normal semi-detached 1930s house. It was going to be about £20,000.
And then you get a lukewarm bath. I mean, who wants that?
Yeah, exactly.
You bath and not shower?
I do both.
Oh.
Anna, let me ask you then, like, as a youngster, how old are you, by the way?
21.
You're only 21. I know.
I vaguely remember that.
Your generation, I think partly, this is a terrible stereotype, so tell me if it's wrong.
That's all right.
Yours is the generation who get very cross at the older people, saying, you're not going to leave us a planet that we can live in. Stop moaning about your lukewarm bath and do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, it's like the Instagram politics of our generation. I think they see a few infographics and then think they know everything about the climate crisis. And it's like you've got a rise of young activists in like Just Stop Oil, for example, blocking the roads, gluing themselves to whatever building they find. And I think for many people it's about getting politically active. But I also think as well there is a general disgruntlement at the government, and I think they might fuel that into, you know, this is how we go against the government. And I think for a lot of these people, they don't actually understand what they're talking about. They've just pulled a few points from social media. I think Phoebe Plummer is a huge example of that when she did her interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg, and when he was calmly interviewing her, just asking her some very simple questions, she got very defensive. She was saying some outlandish statements that were just for scaremongering. She didn't understand what she was saying.
That was the GBNews interview that Jacob Rees-Mogg did. If you'd missed it, do look at it on the website, on the app. It was brilliant.
He did it so calmly in a measured way, didn't he?
Yeah.
And she was coming out with these outlandish theories. The whole world's going to burn.
And he stayed very calm throughout all of it.
But this is how these arguments are won. It's not with emotion. It's with facts, and it's with data, and it's with statistics. And sadly, the green issue, a bit like we saw with pandemics and everything last couple of years, there's so much emotion comes into it that actually sense goes out of the window.
We're going to have our debate about cash when the guys come back next
Oh,
time.
yes, I'm looking forward to that one.
I'm going to produce an antique, because I was accused of being a relic, because I still use a chequebook, Sam.
They exist.
Yes, they do. And I'm not giving up my chequebook. Do you know what a chequebook is?
I think I know what a chequebook is.
Are you sure you
I've seen them before.
It's not out of a museum, it's coming out of my briefcase, and I like my checkbook, and if you're listening, my bank, I'm not giving it up.
Right, up next.
All cash.
We're going to be in Berlin awaiting this landmark speech from King Charles. More of these two as well. You're with GB News.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. A few heavy showers around today. Might get caught in a downpour, but overall, generally a brighter day compared to yesterday, with most of us seeing some sunny spells. It's quite mild, but it is still quite blustery. It's going to get windier tonight, though, as this area of low pressure moves in across the south. That's going to bring some very gusty conditions and some further heavy rain. Some pretty lively showers out there this afternoon. Not everywhere seeing the downpours, but where we do catch them, they could turn into thunderstorms, parts of the Midlands, eastern England in particular. But showers also affecting parts of Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Don't catch the showers, you'll see some decent spells of sunshine. It is fairly breezy, but it is mild. Temperatures getting into the teens for most of us. 17 is possible over parts of eastern England. But then the winds pick up in the southwest and the wet weather sweeps in, this band of rain marching northwards, and those winds really gusting up. We have a Met Office yellow warning in place for those winds. The south coast of Wales and the coast of southern England could see gusts of 50 to 60 miles an hour. Some places may get 70 mile an hour gusts. That could cause some issues. Tending to turn drier and colder across Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland, but a wet and windy day tomorrow to come across the Midlands, southern England and South Wales. That wind warning in place until lunchtime. Those winds could cause some disruption. The rain may cause some problems too, particularly over parts of Devon and Cornwall. Heavy showers for southeast England and much of Wales. A sprinkling of showers elsewhere, but for much of northern England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, it's a dry day. Turning cloudier and quite a bit colder in the east, though, with a lot of mist and low cloud coming in from the North Sea. Still pretty wet and blustery across southern parts during Friday evening. That'll only slowly peter out through the night, and we'll keep a lot of mist and low cloud as we head into the weekend across the east. Speaking of the weekend, it will slowly turn dry. Still some rain in places on Saturday, but also turning a little bit colder. Goodbye.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, it's 11 o'clock. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce. Coming up on the show today.
Well, families are going to be forced to pay even more now if they don't switch away from gas. This is all part of the government's dash to net zero. It's going to cost you a lot more. They call it powering up Britain. We say it's a bit of a rip-off.
The government is facing more pressure from some Tory MPs to stop the European Court of Human Rights from restricting its illegal migration bill. Stay with us for the latest.
And the King, he's in Germany on his first official state visit. He's about to address the German Parliament, the first ever British monarch to do so. Stay with us as we continue our royal coverage.
And teachers have been accused of allowing children to change their gender without telling their parents. Is this a step towards dangerous gender ideology or allowing young people to take control of their lives?
It's blooming outrageous, that's what it is now. Good morning, we all know what you think on those stories, and I bet you've got a lot to say on the fact schools are allowing children to change their gender without telling mum and dad. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, but first we're going to get the latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The government's set to announce plans to cut greenhouse gases and lower energy costs. The new net zero plan, called Powering Up Britain, will invest in renewables and nuclear in a bid to make the country less reliant on foreign energy supplies. Investment will go into carbon capture technology and offshore wind, as well as hydrogen production. But Shadow Levelling Up Minister Alex Norris says the proposals are nothing new.
Want to see Britain be a clean energy superpower. That's what the Americans are going for. They want, as always, they're looking at new markets, and this is going to be a huge new market over the next few decades, and they want to be dominant in it. And I think we should be seeking to do that as well, you know, particularly in the clean energy space. I actually agree with some of the points made by Grant about carbon storage. That's a real opportunity. But actually today, you know, what we've heard from the government, you know, it's the same old press releases revived, and we were being told they're a revolution, they're anything but, you know, particularly disappointing with an absence of onshore wind.
It comes as the Chancellor accuses President Biden of protectionism over his plan to offer green tax breaks to American car manufacturers. Jeremy Hunt's concerned the levies could wipe out the UK's £4.3 billion car export market to the US. Energy Security Secretary Grant Shapps says the US is cutting the UK out of an already competitive green market, that countries need to work together. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is announcing his party will freeze council tax bills this year. He's unveiling the pledge at a launch of Labour's local elections campaign in Swindon. The move will be funded by a windfall tax on the profits of oil and gas companies. The Standards Committee has recommended MP Margaret Ferrier be suspended for 30 days for breaching COVID rules. The Rutherglen and Hamilton West MP could face a by-election as a result of the suspension. Ms Ferrier took part in a Commons debate in September 2020 whilst awaiting the results of a COVID test. She then travelled back to Scotland by train after receiving a positive result instead of isolating. Around £21 billion has been lost by the government through fraud since the start of the COVID pandemic. The National Audit Office says that 4 times the amount lost in the previous 2 years. Just over £7 billion of that relates to schemes introduced by the government during the pandemic, such as employment support. The spending watchdog warns it's very likely the majority of taxpayers' money will be recovered. 3 people have been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder after 2 men were shot dead in Cambridgeshire last night. Police say the incidents in Sutton and Bluntisham were linked and targeted. A shotgun and a car believed to have been used in the attacks have been recovered. The Vatican says Pope Francis had a peaceful night in hospital after being admitted for a respiratory infection. It's understood the 86-year-old complained of breathing difficulties in recent days. He was taken to Rome's Gemelli Hospital for tests and doesn't have COVID. It's hoped that he could still be discharged in time for Palm Sunday celebrations on April the 2nd. And King Charles is at the Bundestag, where he'll become the first British monarch to address the German Parliament. And these are live images. The German president hailed the visit as a new chapter in relations between his country and the UK yesterday during a state banquet in Berlin. President Steinmeier thanked the king for choosing Germany as his first foreign visit as head of the royal family, describing it as a tremendous personal gesture. And ever wondered what one of the biggest creatures ever to walk the earth might look like? Well, very soon you'll be able to. The replica skeleton of the Patago Titan Majorum is about to go on display at the Natural History Museum in London. The giant belongs to the group known as the Titanosaurs and was discovered nearly 10 years ago in South America. It's the most complete gigantic dinosaur ever discovered. And to give you an idea of just how big it was, it weighed in at a whopping 57 tonnes. That's about 8 times heavier than a T-Rex. It'll open to the public at the end of the month. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Andrew and Beth.
I love that Titanosaur. I'm going to take the kids to go and see that.
I remember seeing the Tyrannosaurus Rex when I was a schoolboy at the Natural History Museum. It was awesome because I was so small. It was so tall. This is even bigger.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Well, Easter holidays, a lot of kids break up this Friday. Mine do, so that'd be a nice thing to do.
It's not there yet, I don't think.
Oh, is it not?
Not open to the public just yet, so don't head
Typical.
off just yet.
Typical. And then I'll probably have to book 3 weeks in advance on an app that I can't get loaded onto my phone, and then it'll all crash and we'll never get to see the Titanosaur. Right. You've been getting in touch with your views. We're talking about this big, what do they call it? This is like a green day today for the government.
It's the dash to net zero, showing no signs of slowing down. Are they mad?
Just when we think they couldn't turn the volume up on this topic any louder, they've done so. Grant Shapps is walking around today talking about how we're all just going to have to change our houses. And Ralph has said, my son has a modern house with a fitted heat pump, which he cannot afford to use to heat his home. He's using the wood burner, which also came with the house.
And that's going to be made illegal, isn't it? The
They've already in London. Sadiq Khan doesn't want you to be warm. Mandy has said, so the government wants to penalise gas users in favour of electricity. Guess how much electricity in this country is generated currently? That's right, in gas-fired power stations. It's absolutely baffling, says Mandy.
And here you go. So here the government going to delay raising the age which you've got to work to 68 because they know politically it's unsaleable. This net zero is unsaleable. They get away with it, Bev, because the Labour Party's committed to it, so are the Lib Dems. The Greens want to go even faster. So where do you go?
Yeah.
If you want to oppose it.
It's like a sort of captured ethos, isn't it, that we're not allowed to argue with. There's a unanimous position on this from all of the various political parties, which always worries me.
Now, a little later, we're going to be going to Germany. In fact, I think we can go to Germany because the King is due to address the German Parliament. We gather he's only going to speak a little bit in German, Bev, because then he's going to speak in English. But,
good. Otherwise, you and I are going to be useless at translating what he's saying.
Did you do German at school?
No, I didn't. No, I just did a little bit of French.
Yeah, I didn't do it very well either. But we have to remind ourselves of the German heritage, of course, because it was only in 1917 that the royal family became the House of Windsor. It used to be the House of Saxe, Coburg, Gotha, and George V changed it because, of course, it was the German connection because of the First World War. And, of course, Kaiser Bill was George V's cousin. George V, of course, is the grandfather of the late Queen. So it's no wonder he's steeped in German history. And, of course, Prince Philip's sisters
That's what I was just going to say, yes. They lived in Germany, didn't they, Prince Philip's sisters, even though his family was Greek?
They were married to German officers. One of them was a Nazi, I think. They weren't allowed to the wedding of Prince Philip and the Queen in 1947 because it was only 2 years after the end of the war. And I think the King, when he's there during this trip, is going to find time to see some of his German cousins, which would be rather nice.
Yeah, it will be rather nice. He's not made time to see his son, though, has he?
No, and of course, don't forget, at the funeral of Prince Philip, some of those German relatives were at the funeral.
Yes, of course. We will bring that to you when King Charles starts talking.
You know what happened? There'll be some boring German dignitary doing the introduction.
Can we talk about that lady like that?
Who will go on and on because it's their moment in the bright lights of publicity. And you can just imagine the King's thinking, get on with it, woman, get on with it. But of course, he's going to be polite. And it is history in the making because it is the first time a British monarch has ever addressed the German Bundestag. The Queen went to Germany 3 times, so this is Charles's. Charles has been many times, but first time as king, and we shouldn't forget he's on this official visit even before he's been crowned the monarch.
I wonder why the Queen never spoke there.
Don't know. It's a measure of how important the Germans regard this visit because it's a great honour. As you know, when we have heads of state often address our state. Our parliament, I can remember being there when Mandela did it. It was a very moving moment. Betty Boothroyd, whose funeral was yesterday, led him by the hand down to his position in Westminster Hall. So this is significant. I think it's a sign that post-Brexit, Britain and Germany want to get their act together and improve relations. It's a new German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, after Angela Merkel disappeared. I think the King is about to get to his feet because I think that interminable speech by the German local dignitary has come to an end.
This is what soft power looks like, isn't it, in 2023?
It is. And, of course, great quiz question for our viewers and listeners on GB News. What's the name of the President of Germany?
Oh, didn't we? I think
I wrote it down.
Yes.
Frank Walter Steinmeier. And the German Chancellor, of course, is Olaf Scholz, because the fact is the King is recognisable all around the world.
Absolutely, absolutely.
In the same way his mother was. She was the most famous, most photographed woman on the planet. And I think Charles probably is the most photographed, famous man on the planet. He's just getting up now, the King. He's got his speech with him. He's shaking hands with the local Premier. So we're going to go live now to listen to our King, Charles III, addressing for the first time by a British monarch the German Bundestag. So may he do well.
Sehr geehrter Herr Bundespräsident, sehr geehrte Frau Bundestagspräsidentin, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, es ist eine große Ehre, heute bei Ihnen zu sein. Meine Frau und mir bedeutet es sehr viel, dass wir auf meiner ersten Auslandsreise als König nach Deutschland eingeladen wurden. Und vor allem, dass ich hier sprechen darf, das Bekenntnis zur Freundschaft unserer Länder zu erneuern. Es gibt kaum einen besseren Ort dafür als dieses Gebäude, dessen Steine die Geschichte des 20. Jahrhunderts erzählen. Es demonstriert selbst, was unsere beiden Länder verbindet. 1933.
Royal reporter who's in Germany with the King and the Queen Consort. Cameron, he seems to be making the whole speech in German.
So far he is, Andrew. He is expected to also speak in English, you'll be pleased to know, so do please cut me off when he does start speaking in English. Yesterday it was very similar at the banquet speech he made. He started off in German and then he switched to English. This is the first time, of course, the King has addressed the Bundestag. He is the first British monarch to address German politicians. From my understanding, this whole speech is about the historical ties we share with Germany, and particularly perhaps referencing the fact that clearly there is a war in Ukraine going on right now, and a number of the engagements later on today reflect Ukrainian refugees and the fact that more than 1 million Ukrainian refugees have settled in Germany, having fled the conflict in Ukraine. And last night the King actually praised the German people for their hospitality and their generosity in terms of taking in that amount of refugees. But because of course it wasn't that long ago, Andrew, that that Great Britain and Germany were at war in the First and Second World Wars, but since then, clearly the two countries have reconciled, and the whole point of this state visit is to try and really cement relations and improve relations between our two nations, Germany being a European powerhouse and, of course, the United Kingdom in a post-Brexit world. And let's be frank, perhaps it was a little bit turbulent immediately following Brexit. So Buckingham Palace takes advice in terms of where the king should go for his first state visit from the UK government. So clearly the government of the United Kingdom and indeed Germany feel that a European nation was the most appropriate for the king's first trip abroad as sovereign, and also, of course, the first state visit of the new reign. And again, with the state banquet last night, it was all in white tie, wasn't it? Which is very, very formal indeed. I'm told it's incredibly rare for a German state or formal occasion to be in white tie, which perhaps gives a sense of how important German officials felt this state visit of the King and Queen Consort is. Please do interrupt me if you start speaking in English.
The friendship between our two countries. This friendship meant so much to my beloved mother, the late Queen, who often spoke of the 15 official visits she made to Germany, including her 5 state visits. The first of those in 1965 came when our continent was still deeply scarred by war and the trauma of conflict. Hers was the wartime generation, and like my father, the Queen had served in uniform. That my parents' 11-day tour of Germany should prove to be a pivotal moment in the reconciliation between our nations was therefore a matter of great personal significance to them both. Meine Mutter wusste, welch enorme Errungenschaft diese Versöhnung bedeutete. Und mit ihren vielen Besuchen in Deutschland wollte sie ihren Beitrag dazu leisten. Vielleicht ist das der Grund, warum sie sich einen besonderen Platz im Herzen der Deutschen erobert.
We're going to go back to Cameron Walker, our reporter. Charles, that the King has reverted back to speaking in German. Cameron, interesting that he will address Ukraine head-on, because monarchs never, ever get involved in any party political controversy of any description, but there's no controversy about what's happening in Ukraine. There is a great international coalition supporting military action to try to liberate Ukraine from the Russian invaders.
Yes, I think perhaps it's felt that it is indeed appropriate for the British head of state to directly tackle Ukraine. We saw that in his state's banquet speech yesterday, where again he called out the, and I quote, unprovoked aggression, close quote, of Russia in terms of invading Ukraine. But the part of the speech we're hearing him, the King, speak at the Bundestag, the German Parliament, just now, he spoke of his beloved mother, the late Queen, and the fact that she was of the wartime generation, as in World War II. And he mentions that his mother and father both served in uniform. And then he went on to say that since then, the two countries have reconciled. This idea of reconciliation and building bridges, building peace between our two nations, cementing ties yet again. But clearly this is all with the background of the Ukraine invasion still continuing. This afternoon, the King is expected to view a military demonstration involving both British and German personnel in terms of quite literally building a bridge across a river using amphibious vehicles. So I think perhaps a lot of what the King is reflecting in his speech today we will see play out in the engagements he has planned later on, and indeed the Queen Consorts. Both the King and the Queen Consort are expected to meet Ukrainian refugees. As I mentioned earlier, more than 1 million have settled in Germany. I think Poland's the only other European nation who has taken in more refugees than Germany. And of course, the King will be watching those military exercises as well. And tomorrow in Hamburg, again, it's going back to that reconciliation theme, because the king is expected to perhaps see of the Allied bomb damage which Hamburg experienced towards the end of the Second World War, and perhaps will lay a wreath at one of the damaged buildings there, which has been left as a memorial to that conflict. The king is continuing to speak in the Bundestag, the first British head of state to do so, the first British monarch to do so, addressing German politicians. A very, very significant moment in this post-Brexit world. Of course, it would have had to have been agreed by both the German and the British governments to allow the king to do this. Charles, as Prince of Wales, had addressed the Bundestag before. He talked about sustainability and climate change, and perhaps he will also go on to talk about that in this speech, but we'll have to wait and see exactly what he says. But this time's different because he is the British head of state and the British monarch. And as you spoke about, Andrew, the king now has to be very careful because he can't be drawn into party politics, and he certainly can't be seen to be being dragged into political issues. He needs to be above politics as the monarch, but perhaps he's very much going on the tangent, for want of a better phrase, of humanitarian and shared humanity and shared common interests between all European nations.
Just ask you, I think you stood outside the Reichstag building there, aren't you? Where inside which Prince Charles is speaking. I'm looking at it within that building. Apparently, there is some old graffiti within there from Russian soldiers from the end of World War II. It's a very symbolic building, and in fact, it was burnt to the ground. Almost burnt down inside in 1933, but it was reconstructed, and it's actually British architect Norman Foster was responsible for the new design and the glass dome, which is open to the public. I'm just wondering, Cameron, how is the German media covering this visit by King Charles? Is it on the front pages of all the papers there?
Well, it certainly receives quite an interesting response from German media. Both German and British papers have been very complimentary of the tour. It seems to be quite a big success here so far. There has been no major distractions.
Cameron, we're going to have to interrupt you because we're going back to listen to the King because he's back in English.
Such a profound impact on me over so many years, or so many of my previous visits. Since I first came to Germany, when I was just 13 years old, I have grown to become familiar with the different corners of this remarkable land. Like many British people, I have close personal ties here. In my case, cherished family relationships and associations that go back generations. For all of us, however, there are countless points of connection and common experience in the British-German story, which has unfolded over nearly 2 millennia. Throughout the Middle Ages, the renowned Hanseatic League traded goods from Lübeck and Hamburg to ports up and down the English coast, establishing a trading partnership which underpins our shared prosperity to this day. Where goods travelled, ideas travelled too. Our people came to be inspired by each other's example. Wir entwickelten eine gegenseitige Bewunderung für unsere Literatur und Musik.
We're going back to Cameron Walker in Germany. He's going strong. Do we know how long this speech is going to last, Cameron? Normally, what, 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, I'm told roughly 14 minutes, Andrew. Yes, again, he seems to be continuing to talk about the joint British-German story, talking about the historical story of Germany dating back to millennium through the Middle Ages. He's talking about the trading of goods as well, of course, very perhaps appropriate because the whole point of this trip is kind of strengthening relations after post-Brexit. Clearly, we had the Windsor Framework agreed just a month ago between Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, and then perhaps controversially, a couple of hours after that agreement was made at a Windsor hotel, Ursula von der Leyen met the King at Windsor Castle, which some politicians weren't too pleased about. But of course, another whole point of a state visit is that trading partnerships between the two nations, and the King's power of soft diplomacy really is a key tool in that, in terms of the British arsenal, as you like, in terms of improving relations.
Cameron,
with our
we're going to just go back to the speech now because he's gone back to speaking English. I'm very confused by this.
Sparked in his countrymen the ambition to see those landscapes for themselves. A demand later met by Thomas Cook, the pioneer of tourism, who would organize his first foreign trip along the Rhine, with stops at Cologne, Frankfurt, Heidelberg, and Baden-Baden. Today, millions of Britons visit Germany each year, just as millions of Germans travel to our shores. Britons come to admire Berlin's vibrant culture and nightlife, making up Europe's largest visitor group to this wonderful city. So we are still admiring of each other's culture, dependent upon each other's economies, and inspired by each other's ideas. More recent generations may think as readily of the Beatles or Kraftwerk as they do of Brahms or Baron, but the web of cultural connections is as strong as ever. And perhaps most importantly, for the last 50 years, we have laughed together, both at each other and with each other. And while Miss Sophie's the same procedure as every year, James, and while that does not, I hope, give a very accurate impression of modern Britain, it is, I know, an integral part of a German Happy New Year. In Britain, Germany's comedy ambassador, Henning Wenn, has given us an understanding of German quirks, as Monty Python brought our own here. And like all old friends at moments, the warmth of our relationship allows a small smile at each other's expense. Natürlich gibt es auch Rivalität. Ich denke, da besonders...
Cameron Walker, we're going back to Cameron Walker, because guess what? The King's gone back into German. Cameron, how's he doing? Getting lots of laughs?
He is getting a lot of laughs, yes. He seems to be going down pretty well with German politicians. If you at home were not familiar with that particular joke, every New Year's Eve in Germany there is a particular comedy sketch that is played on all German TV channels involving a New Year's dinner for one. So the King was making the joke that that Great Britain is not being left out in the cold by itself as everyone in Europe kind of gathers around the table themselves. That's the joke he was making. Clearly it went down very well in Germany. Not quite sure how well it's going to go down in the United Kingdom, but nonetheless, it went down well here. He talked about our shared cultures and our dependence on each other's economy in terms of the United Kingdom and Britain. He talked about Germany's nightlife. Clearly the vibrant culture that we all shared. He's talked about the history already and the fact that he came to Germany when he was just 13 years old, the King did. I believe he came with Prince Philip, actually, his father, and he said he's grown to become familiar with different corners of this remarkable land. And
All
he
right,
has close
Cameron.
personal
Cameron,
ties.
thanks. That's Cameron Walker, who's our royal reporter with the King's speech, which appears to be going a bit longer than 14 minutes. It's back in German, I think.
And it's really like the King is messing with the media, isn't he?
Oh.
He's playing with us. He knows that's going to be really difficult for broadcasters to do partly German.
Produces of power from offshore wind. Many German firms are involved in the production and erection of turbines off the British coast. The North Sea, across which our people have travelled and traded for generations, is soon to be the site of a new interconnector, allowing us directly to trade electricity. Our countries are both accelerating the expansion of our hydrogen economies, the fuel which could transform our future, and I'm looking forward to seeing Hamburg's plans to use hydrogen in its efforts to become a fully sustainable port. These innovations are vital in combating the existential challenge of climate change and global warming, which confronts us all. And as such, I was delighted to meet participants of the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue yesterday to hear how countries are accelerating this transition. Seit langem sind die britische und die deutsche wissenschaftliche Forschung wegweisend. Bei der Gründung.
He's gone back into German again. That's our king. I thought that speech was going to last 14 minutes. You know, the Queen always said perhaps sermons in church, they should never go longer than 7 or 8 minutes, never, which is why there was a lot of laughter amongst Catherine Middleton at the wedding of Harry and Meghan. If you remember, that vicar went on and on. The vicar she brought in from America went on for 16 minutes. We all nearly fell asleep. Now, oh, Cameron's back. Cameron Walker. He's going on a bit, isn't he? The King?
Well, he is going on a bit, but then he also keeps having to stop because people are either laughing or clapping. I do, you'll be pleased to know, now have the German translation into English. So he's saying for a long time, British and German scientific research has been leading the way. Our countries rank in the top 2 in Europe for founding successful new technology startups. Our universities and research institutions collaborate more often with each other than any other 2 countries in Europe. This helps to explain why a Berlin-based company has pioneered in London the use of lamp posts for electrical vehicle charging points, while in Berlin you can book a ride in a fully electric London-style taxi. Internationally, too, we are working closely together. We helped initiate the Just Energy Transition Partnership with South Africa at the climate conference in Glasgow. A further such partnership with Indonesia was the result of much work during Germany's G7 presidency. So before he started speaking in German, he was talking about climate change and sustainability.
Cameron, we're going back to listen to the King because he's back in English. Maybe this is for the final time, but obviously we're hanging on his every word, aren't we, Bev?
To them all, I could only offer my sincere and heartfelt gratitude. Tomorrow we will once again stand with the people of Germany in solemn remembrance. In Hamburg, I will pay my respects at the memorial to the Kindertransport, which 85 years ago saved the lives of more than 10,000 Jewish children from Nazism and gave them safe passage to new lives in Britain. I will also join you, Mr. President, and First Mayor Tschentscher in remembering those who perished in the Allied bombing of Hamburg in 1943. Aus der Vergangenheit zu lernen ist unsere oberste Pflicht.
He's gone back into Germany. German. Cameron Walker is still with us, our royal reporter. Cameron, any sign he's winding up?
Yes, because I can see exactly what he's going to say. So it's going to be in the next couple of minutes. I well, hopefully, unless there's a very long applause. The King was talking there about, again, he's talking about our shared history, and particularly has referred to World War II and the kind of engagements he's going to be getting up to in Hamburg. He's going to be paying respect to the Kindertransports Memorial, where 10,000 Jewish children were saved from Nazism by being given safe passage to the United Kingdom. He's also going to be paying respect at a memorial to the Allies' bombing of Hamburg in 1943. In terms of what he's talking about now in German, he's talking about heeding the lessons of the past in our sacred responsibility, but it can only be fully discharged through commitment to our shared future. He is talking about also shared threats and our shared value, perhaps, of democracy and the strive for security in Europe and prosperity. I think perhaps he is referring there to the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion, and how Europe, he says, European nations should be stood side by side and strengthen each other's relationships. A very long speech, Andrew, to be frank, clearly interrupted in a nice way by applause and laughter. A lot he covered there. Just to recap, he was talking about our shared histories, the strengthening of relations. I think he's just finished, but he's also went on to talk about our trading relationships, a couple of deals to do with sustainability and climate change, energy resources. Clearly, in a post-Brexit world, British and German governments would want to shore up those kind of trading relationships, and that is perhaps why the state visit was decided to come here to Germany for the first one. He also talked about cultures and German and British nightlifes, London-style electric taxis who travel around Berlin as well, and he talks about World War II and the fact that both Britain and Germany has reconciled quite substantially since then, and then referred quite subtly, I have to add, but referred nonetheless to perhaps the conflict in Ukraine and the need for both Germany and Britain to stand together in the face of aggression.
We're just watching pictures of I think walking out with Barbel Bass, and she is the German Parliament President. Our guest star. Thank you, Cameron. That wasn't easy. Well done.
You did very well, didn't he?
You did very well. I wonder if he's going to set the precedent now of doing where every international country he goes to, he's going to do speeches like that.
Let's hope he doesn't go to China. I think he'd struggle with Mandarin. Oh no, he won't get invited to China because we don't really do China, do we?
Sam, with your newspaper editor's, political editor's hat on, what do you make of that speech? How would you write about that in the newspaper?
Well, thankfully, I would leave it to our royal editor.
Yes.
It's really not much.
Richard Palmer, who's a very fine man.
He's a great man, yeah, and I'm sure he will give a brilliant write-up tomorrow, and you can read about it then.
But he'll get a lot of praise, won't he, for speaking in German.
I mean, it was
well.
impressive, wasn't it? You know, and clearly...
I couldn't have done it.
No, but clearly a lot of thought and practice will have gone into that, you know, but obviously impressive, obviously making a point. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's impressive.
What did you think there, Sam?
Yeah, I probably would have to echo what's just been said, and I think obviously he's trying to do it in German as well. And again, if you know, will this become a tradition? Would he do this for all the other places that he visits? But I think he's definitely more outspoken though than other monarchs. I've seen that before. I think that's been discussed. He's definitely a more political monarch as well, and he's put his hand in on particular issues that maybe other monarchs might not have done.
Stuff, didn't he? Straight into a lot of that green stuff, which I think might irritate some people. But his speech would have had to have been approved by Downing Street and the Foreign Office. Isn't that right, Sam?
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it would have gone through, as much as he wants to say what he wants, he has to be cleared by number 10.
Yeah, and they obviously advise on which countries he visits. So, you know,
well, France will be the next because, of course, the French visit was cancelled because of the riots over the state pension. Going up from 60 to 64.
I mean, we'd be so lucky to have 64,
we're arguing about going to 68, aren't we? So I think he'll get good coverage, won't he, tomorrow?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it was a very accomplished speech, wasn't it? Very impressive. Obviously, the German audience were thrilled. They seemed to be, delighted by the attempt.
I wonder if that's why Harry wasn't at the court case yesterday and today, because he didn't want to distract from his father.
Possibly. And I'm just sitting here looking at this and thinking, how does it reflect Great Britain on the global stage? What will Rishi Sunak be thinking when he's just watched that on GB News? No doubt he was watching this morning at 10 Downing Street, Rishi Sunak. I wonder what he makes of that. What if he feels that, OK, this is good, this is positioning this country on the global stage, we're being well regarded, we may not be in the EU anymore, Anna, but we still have a role and we still hold the attention of other countries via our royal family.
Yeah, he probably would capitalise off that, I reckon, especially with the government's not, it's not going very well for the government at the minute, so I think anything that he can do to spin it, in a positive light for them, he will do.
I think it's got a bit better for the government, actually, late last few weeks. They don't appear to have made any gaffes apart from net zero, which is a big one.
They've done some clever media, they've done some clever comms management.
Yes, exactly.
No doubt about that. Are we moving on now?
Yes.
We're going to talk about another topic. Excellent. Right. Let's talk about, Anna, this is, in fact, Sam, this is your story, in the Express today, about retailers rejecting cash. Now, this is a conversation that I wanted the nation to be having for the last 2 years,
Now,
never mind 2 minutes.
Here are the two antiques. These are my checkbooks, Anna, which you don't know what they are.
No,
they're not out of a museum.
No idea.
Here is a checkbook.
It's like money, but it's paper.
Yeah,
Wow.
And I am not, under any circumstances, giving them up. Now, you got rid of yours yesterday, didn't you?
Coincidentally, I was going through some old stuff in a desk, and I thought, I don't use my checkbooks anymore, and I shredded the checkbooks. But I'm a big fan of cash, Sam.
Oh, well, do you know what? I think I told you last week, I don't ever carry cash.
What? Oh, yes, you are a bit like the Queen.
Yeah, I am like the Queen, very much so. And I had a night out in Doncaster on Friday night.
You didn't.
I had no cash, got in the taxi, it's cash only.
Pound coins. A little bag of pound coins. Because if you want to give someone a tip in a cafe, you don't want to do it on a credit card because probably the cafe gets it, not the waiter.
Now,
Cash.
do we just look like relics to you, Anna? The idea that we want to be able to transact
Do you know what
privately.
this is, Anna? Do
Oh,
you know what it is? Are you sure?
Well, that's
It is
a
legal
bit before
tender.
my time. But I think it's definitely a move towards everything being digitised because, especially, everyone carries cash on their phones now, and for some people, they don't want their digital wallet being tracked. Some people they just prefer to carry cash. That should always be an option, in my opinion.
I think it should, and I think we give up cash at our peril. That's what worries me.
No, I mean, there was a petition. I was going to say, in government, there was a petition, I think over 33,000 people signed, trying to make it mandatory that, when you go into a business, that you should be able to pay with cash, and they declined.
It's a choice.
Yeah, it is a choice, and it's legal tender.
And I'm telling you, when the shop that says, sorry, we don't take cash, bye-bye, they lose my business.
And do you think people really understand, though, the significance? Because there are lots of youngsters in the office that we discuss it. Say, it's convenience.
I was accused of being an old relic.
Yes.
By somebody not that young, actually.
Yeah, but this is the thing. Be careful of anything that's being pushed through under the guise of convenience, because once we cannot privately transact with another individual without either the state or business knowing what you're doing, all your freedom is gone. So we should be aware of it.
But there is a wider issue, isn't there, of actually budgeting. It is important to have cash for budgeting
It's a good way to
purposes.
budget, isn't it? Because when the
easier if
cash is
you've got-
gone...
Exactly.
So my mum
see it in
did
your
this.
hand.
That was my mum's approach because they didn't have a bank account till I was about 15 or 16.
Yeah. So I think for that reason, and also lots of people don't have same online access.
No.
Particularly if you're in rural areas, you might be in not spots with broadband. So people do rely more on cash in different parts of the country. And I think
When
we've got
did
to
you
really
give up on
protect it.
cash?
Oh, probably about 3 or 4 years ago.
Did you?
Yeah. I just use my phone, but it's quite bad because obviously everything I do is then tracked. I
They know
really like
exactly.
that.
I know. And
it's just so convenient.
We worry about an ID card.
Yeah.
Everything's on your Oyster
Yeah.
card or your credit card.
Nobody has Oyster cards under anymore. That's
already outdated.
I've got one. I have got an Oyster card which I use on the tube every day because I'm a great public transport man. And it's got my photograph, but it's got my photograph on it. But they know exactly. I use my Oyster card. By the way, Mayor of London, if you think you're getting rid of it, I ain't giving it up. I just renewed it for a year.
But you see, this is the thing. The tech is moving so quickly at the moment, isn't it? The fact that Oyster cards are now outdated and there's something else.
But when they use their phone, Bev, as they're trying to get through a train barrier, it always takes longer.
Yes, it's true. But I think Anna, do you think you're the exception in your generation for understanding the fact that money is something that we need to hang on to, cash money?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something, I think for many people, it's just about convenience. You know, you can just tap away at your phone. Very easy to start, you know, spending a lot of money when you can just tap away. But there is a bigger issue in terms of the fact that you know, it's in terms, especially when it's all digital, your data can be tracked. I think that's one thing. And there are ways that it can be controlled, especially if we're moving in that direction.
Yeah.
There is a way that your cash could actually be controlled. And I think that's something that people should be aware of as well. And that's why cash should always be an option. You should be able to take money out and be able to pay for it with, you know, cash, legal
Well
tender.
said.
You see, also, because everything it comes back to this blimmin' green agenda, doesn't it, all the time? And when you think about what this will mean in actuality, if you've used your carbon miles that week, if the government says, OK, we get to the point, and I don't think this is that long away, we're looking at 2030 pushing all this through, they've showed, they say you've used your carbon mileage for this week, Mr Pearce, I'm so sorry, you can't go and buy petrol for your car. Well, we won't have petrol cars,
No,
will we?
right.
But, you know, you won't be able to travel in the same way because it's the mission creep, isn't it, of control.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's also, it's great for the taxman, isn't it? You know, no more cash in hand.
Yes, of
It's great
course,
for
I'm sure
taxman.
that's right.
Yeah. You know, it's certainly the government would prefer us all to use cards.
But honestly, the waitress or waiter's face lights up when I need cash. If I'm in a cafe or something, it lights up because that's going to go in their pocket and not in their employer's pocket.
Right, let's move on, guys, then. Anna, OK, so yesterday we were talking about migrants, refugees, asylum seekers being housed in former military bases, being taken from the hotels and put in these alternative accommodation. Well, guess what? The locals in these areas are not happy.
No, I can imagine. Yeah, especially I think it's a disruption of their local community, and it actually puts people in danger as well. I believe it was in December, I think 6.3 million that was the cost for, you know, putting up all these hotels a day.
Yeah.
So this is an increasing problem, and I think especially for the local community, they're quite, you know, they have their local community and people are quite close-knit, and that would be quite a big disruption with loads of people now coming in. It would put people in a lot of danger.
Well, they're putting
between
1,500 to 2,000 in these camps. That's a lot, and they're often in rural areas. And it's not just... And some local councils, I think they're going to judicial review it or go to court to try to block it. It's the old problem of not in my backyard, Sam.
It is. Essex are going to take legal action to try and block this. And I think... But there is an issue, isn't there? There's a real conundrum for the government. Where do you put these people? You know,
we shouldn't have let them in the first place.
Yeah, that's a whole different argument.
Should
but
not have let them in.
Yeah, but obviously we're spending £6 million a day on hotel accommodation. Now, actually, a lot of locals get very upset about that. I know Conservative MPs are furious about this because they're getting it in the neck on the doorstep because, you know, if you've got the big grand hotel in the middle of the town, which is at the heart of the town, is where everybody has their weddings and all, these are all being taken over now. Yeah. So obviously this is to shift the problem away from that, but all you do is shift the problem to another area. So it doesn't solve the problem, does it? And I think this is the
and interesting to see, we were talking about this yesterday, Bev, weren't we? The Foreign Secretary, no less, James Cleverly, is backing the opposition because he's got one of these camps in his constituency. And his job as an MP is to say, locally, I don't want them, even though it's the cabinet policy.
Yeah, and you know, I think whenever you put whatever group of people it is, whenever you put a big group of people into somewhere just overnight, that's when you get tensions. And but nobody seems to be able to come up with an answer to how you resolve it without doing that. You know, if you disperse people, then the government struggles then to keep track of where everybody is. So they prefer to kind of keep people together, and obviously then you get these issues.
I mean, my argument would be that we should resolve the issue of immigration rather than trying to manage this problem, because I think there's, you know, this is a huge crisis at the moment where we're having high-scale immigration and the government aren't stepping in, and we're not. And I think people voted for Brexit to control immigration. That's one of the core issues, and it's still an issue we're still talking about to this day.
And I heard the Justice Secretary Raab on the radio, maybe it was on GB News, talking yesterday about all the boats and barges they're going to use offshore. How many have you got? Didn't know.
No.
Because they're making it up, some of it, Sam, aren't they, as they go along?
But talking of making it up...
Sorry, go on.
No, go on, Sam.
No, I was just going to say, Rishi Sunak has also rode back a bit on his Rwanda flight. Like he was talking about summer for flights, and now he's not putting a date on that. So you know,
and that might be why this is now being pushed through, because we're not going to get Rwanda, but look, we're putting everybody in former military bases or boats. Anyway, it's a mess. The segue that you just crashed for me, Sam, was about people making things up, which leads to Boris Johnson, Anna McGovern, and Partygate. He's flippantly said that he's in trouble for eating lunch at his desk.
Yeah, and for him, it's because he does not care. I think for him, he is so above it all, and he literally could not care less about all the damage he's done to this country. I think for many people, millions of people across the country, across the UK, we were put under these draconian lockdown measures, and Boris Johnson, rather than following his own rules, he was, you know, completely ignoring them as if he was above it all. It was definitely a one rule for us, one rule for them mentality. The point is, you know, it's not about just having a piece of cake. The point was we should never have been under lockdown in the first place, but then the fact that he has just insulted this country by completely lying his way while he was Prime Minister, denying everything that he'd done, it's a complete insult to everyone who lost loved ones, who are completely isolated and having the biggest mental health crisis in this country than a COVID crisis.
You do wonder about how wise this is to be so flippant when the Privileges Committee is still investigating whether he knowingly misled Parliament. Here he's being very flippant about the fine. First Prime Minister to get a fixed penalty fine, by the way, in history.
But I think it's clear that he actually just is really angry about being fined.
Is.
And, you know, he says, I'll just read you the quote. He says, a couple of years ago, the Met actually fined me in circumstances I find still almost too painful to describe, simply for standing at my desk in the Cabinet room and eating lunch. And so clearly he's just feeling very aggrieved that he was ever fined in the first place. Obviously Rishi Sunak was fined too.
And he was only in the room for about 3 minutes, wasn't he?
Yeah. And also, bear in mind the little old ladies who sat for a coffee on a park bench, they felt like that.
They did.
All those people who had family round for a cup of tea in the garden and got dubbed into the police, and they felt like that, Boris Johnson.
Like, there was a time where if you had a coffee and you just go for a walk, you'd actually get approached by the police and fined for breaking lockdown restrictions. I know. And I think the government, they knew that it wasn't the crisis that they were making it out to be. It was a big propaganda campaign to scare people to comply and to stay at home. And I think it's just a huge insult because they knew that it wasn't a crisis. That's why they were breaking the lockdown rules that they expected everyone else to follow. It's a huge disgrace.
When do we think this Privileges Committee thing will... Because it's taken 2.5 years to do that wretched SNP MP who came to London knowing
Margaret Ferrier.
Margaret Ferrier, knowing she had COVID, or it was the other way around. 2.5 years to decide to ban her for 30 days. There'll be a by-election. They can't take 2.5 years with the Prime Minister, can they?
No. But I think it is going to be still quite a few months before we get an actual result on this, because although Boris Johnson gave his evidence, they've still they might take evidence from other people still, and then they will spend ages deliberating.
Which they'll do in private, of course, and they made the Prime Minister do it in public, which was breaking a precedent as well, by the way. They turned it into a circus.
Absolutely, and it will. So I think it will probably be, I would say, June, July probably is realistic.
They're gonna
one last quick story. Anna, US banning TikTok.
Yes.
Now, we did discuss this a bit last week, didn't we? But this story kind of moves on. And the idea is that it's going to damage the notion of a global internet if they ban TikTok. What do you think?
Well, I think for a start that there are huge concerns with TikTok because of national security, especially ByteDance owning TikTok, and the fact that your data can immediately be handed over to the Chinese Communist Party on request because of an article that they signed into law. And I think this is a huge thing, especially for children and young people as well. You know, children as young as 13 can use that platform, and children who are even younger are getting away with using the platform just by having an adult appear in the video for like a split second. That's how they get away with it. So I think there are many dangers concerning TikTok, particularly with the brainwashing of children and young people. The fact that you can look up a topic on your search feed and then within a minute you'll be spammed with this content continuously. And that's if you're looking up, for example, maybe depression, anxiety, eating disorders. This is content that is completely spammed on children's pages. And then in terms of national security, the fact that they hold all your data on that platform and that can be handed over, I think there's a lot of concerns of it. And with the government that have now banned it in Parliament, I think this shows that this will be introduced even further because they know the dangers that are being presented.
It's not going to affect me, this ban, because I don't really know what TikTok is.
But it affects all the MPs, doesn't it, Sam?
Yeah.
I mean, they've been told to take it off their work phones.
They have, and Parliament...
And not all of them are going to.
No, Parliament has said, and the government have said, so whether you're a minister or a backbench MP, you're not supposed to use it in those circumstances. But Grant Shapps, a cabinet minister, has said he will still use it on his personal phone.
Yeah, because you can use your personal phone as long as it's not a parliamentary device.
Yeah, I think the parliamentary Wi-Fi. I don't understand the technicalities.
Do you not understand it either,
I've
Sam?
never been on TikTok.
So I'm a relic on Cash. I'm a relic on TikTok. So it seems you're a relic too.
I'm a relic too.
Are you on TikTok?
I'm not. Well, yes, I am on TikTok.
Are you really?
I do have it, but I've just never got round to uploading anything. It's one of those things you feel you should do, but frankly, on top of Twitter and Instagram and everything else, we haven't got time. And we haven't got time for the show either. We've come to the end. Sam Lister, Anna McGovern, thank you so much. It's been a short week for me. I'm back on GB News at 12 o'clock on Saturday, actually. I'm working a Saturday job this weekend.
No rest for the wicked, Bev.
That's right, but coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. Andrew and I will be back on Monday at 9:30.
See you then.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. A few heavy showers around today. Might get caught in a downpour, but overall, generally a brighter day compared to yesterday, with most of us seeing some sunny spells. It's quite mild, but it is still quite blustery. It's going to get windier tonight, though, as this area of low pressure moves in across the south. That's going to bring some very gusty conditions and some further heavy rain. Some pretty lively showers out there this afternoon. Not everywhere seeing the downpours, but where we do catch them, they could turn into thunderstorms, parts of the Midlands, eastern England in particular. But showers also affecting parts of Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Don't catch the showers, you'll see some decent spells of sunshine. It is fairly breezy, but it is mild. Temperatures getting into the teens for most of us. 17 is possible over parts of eastern England. But then the winds pick up in the southwest and the wet weather sweeps in, this band of rain marching northwards, and those winds really gusting up. We have a Met Office yellow warning in place for those winds. The south coast of Wales and the coast of southern England could see gusts of 50 to 60 miles an hour. Some places may get 70 mile an hour gusts. That could cause some issues. Tending to turn drier and colder across Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland, but a wet and a windy day tomorrow to come across the Midlands, southern England and South Wales. That wind warning in place until lunchtime. Those winds could cause some disruption. The rain may cause some problems too, particularly over parts of Devon and Cornwall. Heavy showers for southeast England and much of Wales. A sprinkling of showers elsewhere, but for much of northern England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, it's a dry day. Turning cloudier and quite a bit colder in the east, though, with a lot of mist and low cloud coming in from the North Sea. Still pretty wet and blustery across southern parts during Friday evening. That'll only slowly peter out through the night, and we'll keep a lot of mist and low cloud as we head into the weekend across the east. Speaking of the weekend, it will slowly turn dry. Still some rain in places on Saturday, but also turning a little bit colder. Goodbye.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across